And the first time I ever saw a counterfeit bill, I was blown away. I mean, it had the security strip, it had the watermark, it was the right color, the right texture. You know, I tried newsprint, I tried wrapping paper, I tried rice paper. Once I figured out how to make them properly, I was like, well, how am I gonna actually make money off this? So I got on the darknet, learned about cryptocurrency, the vendor bonds, encrypted chats. This is gonna be the perfect opportunity to, you know, sell these online. Do you ever see two people that you meet that just shouldn't be together?
Right.
You see them in public, or you see them, you know, at the restaurants or somewhere, and you're just like, these two people shouldn't be married.
Right.
That was my parents. So they got divorced when I was about 12.
Oh, okay.
And you know, dad moved out. My sister and I stayed with my mom. There was a lot of stress going on in the house at the time, you know, and so I turned to, you know, smoking pot for the first time.
Right.
And you know, that sort of started off my whole, you know, sort of drug career. And there's, you know, and this is the, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. So there was a lot of kids, you know, doing ecstasy, acid, you know, that kind of stuff. So I sort of experimented with all these different drugs. When I was 15, I ended up having surgery on my left knee. And that was sort of my first experience with Oxycontin. And, you know,
they give you Oxycontin
so they didn't give me Oxycontin specifically, but that was my first experience, I guess, with just opiates in general. So it was like they were like perk 10s.
Right. Well, I guess they got to give you something.
Right. So that was really my first experience with, you know, opiate drugs. And I remember the first time that I ever like took more than I was supposed to. You know, I took like 2 instead of 3. It was like, you know, I was high for the first time, and so I was like, this is great, because I also was able to, you know, skate a lot, not better, but, you know, I wasn't in pain anymore. You know, all this lack of confidence and I don't know, anger that I had towards, you know, my family and certain things that happened to me when I grew up, that sort of, you know, allowed me to, you know, live the way that I wanted to live, I guess, inside my own head.
Right.
You know, so that really sort of kicked things off. The first time I ever tried Oxycontin was when I was 17. And that was just through a friend. Someone had it, you know, we used to do, you know, party on the weekends and stuff. And so one of my friends had a couple 80s, you know, Oxycontin 80s. And when I tried that for the first time, that was when I was like, this is something that I want to do, you know, every day for the rest of my life, because it was that good. I'm actually going to go back a little bit.
Okay.
So there's a couple things that happened to me when I was younger. There was my dad's old babysitter lived in Southern Virginia, and we used to go down there, you know, and visit him, and then my grandparents who lived in Charlottesville on the weekends. And so there was a couple times where I would stay over at his house overnight, and things would get kind of, you know, they get kind of crazy at the house. Like, he'd offer me beer, he'd let me smoke cigarettes, and I'm like, you know, 10, 11 years old. And, you know, he ended up, you know, molesting me a couple times.
Your father?
No, my dad's old babysitter.
Oh, okay.
He was a family friend.
Okay. I thought babysitter. I thought a woman. So when you said
right, yeah. So he was, you know, he was like in his, you know, mid 60s, mid 70s, you know, and he was a close family friend. I mean, this isn't someone that I just met like off the bat, but it was something that sort of happened over and over a long period of time. You know, it wasn't like the first time I went over there this happened. You know, and so that sort of shifted my attitude towards, you know, myself, and then just other like figures in power, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say it, just adults in power when you're a kid, or adults in general when you're a kid, you think of them as being, you know, that they know everything, that they don't make mistakes, that they're infallible.
Right,
you don't have that. You don't realize that, hey, some of these are bad people, some of these do bad things, and you don't really realize it until something bad happens.
Exactly. You put them, you know, on a pedestal, and it's just like they're sort of you know, they can't do anything wrong.
Yeah. It's like your parents. You think your parents are all knowing until you become an adult, and you're like, oh, this is just a couple of fucking people.
They're just people.
Yeah.
They're just people. Exactly. So that happened a couple times over the course of a couple years. I also started, when my parents got divorced, I started hanging out with my dad a lot more, you know, alone, and we started drinking and smoking together. He wouldn't necessarily buy me like alcohol or cigarettes, but if I had them, it was kind of like I was allowed to drink at his apartment, you know, or whatever we were doing.
Right.
We used to go to a lot of like music shows, and, you know, he was a wonderful, wonderful person, but there wasn't any like barrier between like what, you know, I should be doing as a kid and what I should be
doing as an adult.
doing as an adult. So that kind of blurred the lines. And so that was really tough, you know, for me because, you know, when you're allowed to do anything as a kid and you don't have someone telling you that it's bad, you just assume that everyone else is doing it and that it's okay. And so that also started sort of allowing me, I was starting to be able to get away with a lot of different, you know, different things as a kid that most parents would, you know, they wouldn't fucking let that shit happen at all.
Right.
So that was kind of, you know, there was, you know, I didn't realize till years later how sort of dysfunctional that really was. Because when you're a kid, you know, and all my friends, you know, would come over and, you know, do the same thing. So we always thought that that shit was super cool. But, so yeah, Oxycontin at 17, you know, this was really when it hit everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, so all my friends were doing
pill mills.
Pill mills, yeah, everyone was doing it. You know, DC, there was a Purdue Pharma had a headquarters in DC, so there was tons and tons of people that had scripts. Because I had surgery on my knee at 15, I had MRIs. You know, I didn't have to fake anything. It wasn't Virginia, DC, and Maryland were a little bit stricter with the prescriptions, so you couldn't necessarily doctor shop as much,
right?
As like say Florida, but it was still very, very, you know, easy to get, you know, and so for me it wasn't very difficult to support the habit at that point, you know, because everyone has them, and you know we trade scripts, and you know if I was running short, I could go to someone and say, hey, let me get, you know, 50 till next week, you know, all this different kind of stuff. Right. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia to go to school in, I guess it was 2008. I wanted to be a sound engineer. So I went to a small sound recording school there. That's sort of when I started dealing to support my habit because I was in school. So I met a bunch of people there, you know, and we were sort of doing the same thing. I would just, you know, go get scripts from the doctor. You get, you know, Oxycontin 80s, you know, you get Perk 30s, Roxys, you know, a bunch of Somas, Xanax, you know, so you could go to one doctor and get, you know, 700-800 pills, you know,
worth
each visit.
$3,000, you know.
Exactly. So it was very easy to, you know, support the habit at that point. So I get through school and I end up going to rehab in Delray Beach for like 6 months. That's sort of when I started to learn, I guess, about fraud, because I wasn't able to, I didn't really have any connects down here. You know, I was in a halfway house. I was trying to do good, so I didn't really have any money at that point. And
wait, you were in a halfway house?
Yeah.
Did I miss something? I mean,
I went to rehab in Florida.
Okay.
In 2000, I guess it was the end of 2012.
Okay.
And so that's when I learned about fraud.
But what led up to that? I mean, I understand you like, did you go to your mom and she was like, look, you got a problem? Like, I mean, what was that? That
okay. I'm sorry.
You just checked in? I mean,
no. So I was at work, and they realized that I had some sort of problem, and they were like, listen, we'll give you, you know, because I was showing up late for work, you know, I was looking strung out. So they were like, we'll give you, you know, like 90 days to get yourself better. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to get to a rehab. And so there was a place in, it was in Deerfield Beach.
Okay.
And so, you know, I ended up going there. And so I ended up staying down there because I felt like if I had just gone back to, you know, to work immediately in that environment, that I would have, you know,
started using again,
because it's very, you know, the music industry, it's not necessarily that, everyone's doing those kinds of drugs, but it's a constant party. I mean, sometimes you're in the studio for 18, you know, 24 hours at a time. And, you know, people are drinking, smoking, you know, doing other things. But it just, for me personally, it made the job, you know, much easier because it was less stressful, and it just allowed me to, for some reason, when I do opiates, it gives me a lot of energy. So it allowed me to sort of, you know, continue to, you know, sort of try to work through all this stuff.
Right.
So I went to Deerfield and then to a halfway house in Delray briefly. And that's when I learned about fraud, because other people that were living there were sort of doing like check kiting. Some people were doing these tax return scams.
Yeah.
And so I didn't, you know, this isn't anything that I did yet, but I was like, okay, so this is possible. you know, because, you know, when you have a halfway house full of kids, everyone's trying to do as much, you know, dirt as they can to get money, because, you know, most people, they don't, not really working
they don't
at the time. So when I was in Delray, actually, my dad ended up getting in a car accident. He was hit by a drunk driver at about 65 miles an hour. And
in another car.
So he got T-boned. He was making a left-hand turn, and a drunk driver hit him, and he actually went through the passenger side window.
Ooh.
So this was in Charlottesville, Virginia. So he was in UVA hospital. I got a phone call when I was down in Delray, and so I ended up flying, you know, back home, and they pretty much said he was in a coma for like almost 9 months, and so they were pretty much like, he's not going to survive. And so I ended up getting high and relapsing over this.
Right.
So, you know, I'm back in, you know, the DC area. They moved him from UVA hospital to like a hospice center down there. I don't remember the name. And so it was pretty much me and my sister just trying to figure out how we were going to, you know, navigate this. And so I just started, you know, using pills again.
Where's your mom?
So she's up in the DC area, but unfortunately, she just really wasn't part of all that.
Right.
You know, I mean, she would.
How old were you?
So I was like 21 or 22.
Okay.
21 or 22. So, you know, it was very difficult to navigate that. We didn't really know what to do. And so my first, you know, instinct is to just get high over it.
Right.
You know, and so, I start getting high again. You know, we're trying to figure out what to do. And I needed to leave again. And so I decided that I was going to go to another treatment center in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay.
So I don't really know why I chose to go to Vegas.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did that come about?
Honestly, it wasn't really a conscious decision. It was more of I had a friend who worked in the, you know, recovery industry, and they were like, well, this new treatment center is out here in Las Vegas, you know, and we can get you in with the type of insurance that you had at the time. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go here, you know, and see what happens. I just needed to get away from everything, you know. So I moved to Las Vegas, go to this treatment center, and get out and move into a halfway house. And this is sort of where my whole fraud career sort of started. So we move into this halfway house. It's like 10 guys. There's enough room for 10 guys and 10 girls. So I ended up meeting the owner of the halfway house, and we started seeing each other, which is super dysfunctional. But I ended up becoming a manager of this halfway house. So I had access to all this personal information. And so this is when I sort of realized that I could start using people's information, you know, socials, you know, mother's maiden names and whatnot, to get credit cards.
Right.
So I applied for my first credit card when I was at this halfway house. And so that sort of set me up to see like how the system works. Right. What can I do? You know, and this was, you know, back in 2013. So things were much easier back then than they, you know, than they are now. And so I was able to, you know, when you sign up for a halfway house, usually you have to give, I mean, you don't have to, but, you know, an ID, you know, your last known address. Sometimes some of them give, you know, social security numbers and stuff like that. It was also a federally funded halfway house. So people that were getting out to go to drug court would give, you know, their personal information, you know, birth certificates, socials, you know, driver's licenses and stuff like that. So I would literally just go online and apply to all these different credit card companies, get the cards in the mail. And because I was the manager, I was just able to get all the mail, go through it, and then take out what I needed, you know,
right.
What, you know, was theirs. And so for me, that was the pivotal moment where I was like, this is what I'm going to do to support, you know, my drug habit.
This is it for me.
This is it.
Yeah.
You know, it was so simple in my mind that I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I started learning all sorts of different scams. I started learning about, you know, checks, magnetic ink, check stock, driver's licenses. Most companies, they used faxes back then. So for like the AVS, the address verification systems, I was able to fax these, the documents necessary to the certain credit card companies if they're like, oh, well, we need to talk to the homeowner, or we need to, do some sort of verification system to make sure that you are actually this person.
Right.
And so for me, it was very easy to, either doctor them, or you just take templates of, a social security card, a birth certificate, and then, sometimes they also need a driver's license as well, and then fax those over, and then you can change either their address or actually just get the card shipped to whatever address, you were at.
Right.
So that, lasted for a couple years. I was in Vegas for almost 4 years.
And you worked at the
so I was working
treatment place the whole time?
I was working as a manager of the halfway house. The halfway house. Yeah. The girl that I was dating, she was the manager. She she was also, a drug addict, and so we ended up relapsing together throughout this whole process.
That's ridiculous. It's like, the inmates are running the asylum,
Right.
So
right. So that was the first time
Did she know you were doing the credit card thing?
Yeah. So that was the first time I tried meth when I was out in Las Vegas. I sort of switched from opiates to meth. On the West Coast, it's almost as, it's like opiates here on the East Coast. Meth out on the West Coast is just rampant. So that's when I tried meth for the first time. And, it fueled all these negative, behaviors. I started gambling, I started drinking. Fraud obviously became, sort of the forefront of, my activities.
Can I say, what happened with your dad in the meantime? Did he pass away?
So he actually did not pass away from the car accident. No, he actually didn't pass away till 2020 from COVID.
Okay.
But it took him about 3 years to get out of hospice.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very long time. It was a really long time. He ended up going to a home, like an assisted living facility for people with brain injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, again, that was something that always, when I would go home or, have to take care of him for a while. So that was really tough, on me and my sister. That was really tough on me and my sister. So I started using meth.
Yeah.
Full time. You
said you were gambling. You were.
Vegas brings out every negative behavior you can possibly think of, and especially fueled by meth. So I showed her how to do, the credit card fraud, and she had, documents from every person that had been, like, in this house.
Right.
So, you have access to hundreds of people's, information, and so we were just, filling out these forms, online or through the mail, and then getting the cards and going and cashing them out. There was actually one time I had bought, she had a dealer's license to get cars, through the county. And we bought like an old 2008 cop car. She bought a Malibu, and there was one other car, and I got pulled over in this cop car on the second day I had it.
Right.
And I had a folder that had like 9 social security cards, birth certificates under the seat. And the cops were like, why do you have all this information? And I explained to him that I was the owner of a halfway house, and that's why I had all these informations, and they actually let me go,
right.
Which I thought was just like absolutely.
It makes sense, like they're not,
Yeah, it was just crazy to me that you have all this personal information, in a brand new, old cop car, and they're just like, yeah, it's okay, go for it.
And how old were you?
I was 23.
Oh, okay.
23 or 24.
Yeah, that's a little odd.
Yeah. So yeah, in Vegas, we pretty much started doing credit card fraud. There was also a huge, the tax fraud scam was huge out there.
Right.
I didn't really personally do that. I was more about making checks. So I learned how to get a magnetic ink printer, and then get payroll checks, and then print them, either in my name or other people's names, and go have them, cash them out.
Do you know what the pay or the tax scam is?
Yeah, can you explain it? Because I was going to ask that.
The tax scam for Colby's purposes is that what they do is you get someone's information, and then you file taxes for that person before they file them. So you file them, you get their return maybe direct deposited onto a a debit card or something like that. And so you end up getting, $4,500, $3,500, whatever, $6,500.
Right.
The information doesn't even need to be correct, but the IRS doesn't have time to process everybody's tax refund. So the moment you say, hey, I need $6,000, as long as it's not over a certain amount, they immediately just give you the money. They'll figure it out later that it's, of course, when that person goes to file, they say, well, you've already received your return. And then it sparks a whole identity theft. Oh, this was identity theft. And then they have to jump through all these hoops, but you get the $3,500 or $6,500, whatever you end up filing for.
Right.
Sometimes they don't even have to have, you don't even have to know what job they were on, anything. So
yeah, you get the money now, and then whatever happens later. But they
figure it out later.
Right.
You're gone.
Right.
So it was huge. I mean, there was a 10-year period of time where literally people were filing on children's Social Security. I mean, anytime you even filed, the IRS would just cut you a check, and they started clamping down on it.
Yeah, it was at a point where you could get, let's say you filed 10 of them, you could probably get 7 or 8 of them back, and then over time, and I think it was 2016 or 2017, you might, if you filed 10, you might get 2.
Right.
2 at best.
Yeah. And then they started giving out the PIN number, where they
had to do the PIN numbers. Right. Yeah. So they would send you a PIN number in the mail. Or sometimes if you did it online and you were able to pass the, whatever the verification security questions, they'd issue the PIN, over online. But yeah, that scam got really, really difficult. So I sort of wanted to cut all that out. And so I was like, well, I'm going to figure out how checks work.
Right.
Just, payroll checks, personal checks, whatever.
How are you cashing those, though? Are you giving them to people to cash, or are you going into your bank account cashing them?
So I first started doing it with bank accounts that I had, but in little amounts, small amounts, to see if it worked, just to overdraft the account and then see how it worked at first. Then I figured out a lot of places under a certain amount you can go in, grocery stores, Walmart. You can go in with payroll checks, and they will cash them if it's under a certain amount. Sometimes you can get higher limit checks with those, but they'll have to call the bank, which you can also get around that by using one of these spoofing apps or whatever.
Right.
But I would just print them for other people. They would deposit them into the account. Clear. They would take the money out, give me a percentage, and then keep whatever. Let's say the check was for $1,800 or $2,000, I would keep, $1,500, and they would get, $500,
right. And they're a drug addict, so $500.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I didn't really even have to recruit people because, everyone, as long as, for me, especially in drug addiction, as long as I can get, the drugs or the money first and deal with the consequences later, then I'm okay with it.
Right.
Especially when I'm in active use, I don't really care about the consequences when I'm in active use, as long as I can, get high first.
Right.
So, in a halfway house, the turnover rates are super quick usually. Most people, at least at the place I was living at, a month, 2 months, 3 months at best. There's a couple of us that were, in this house for, longer than 6 months to a year. But things would always, happen. People would either move out, move back in with their girlfriend, wife, get a new job, move, relapse, go back to rehab, whatever it was. So that's when I started learning, how to print checks. And I really like doing payroll checks, because most places you didn't have to do any sort of verification. As long as you had an ID that, matched that check, they could cash it on the spot.
Right.
I met a guy in Vegas who also started making IDs, and he was the one that sort of taught me about, actual credit, readers and writers for credit card fraud, like Trax 1, Trax 2, Trax 3.
Right.
This was before the EMV chip cards. So dumps are classified. There's different classification numbers for dumps. So a regular card is 101. And then a chip card is 201. That's sort of like the classification for cards. And so 101 dumps were much easier to get at the time. And so you could get them and then re-emboss them, track 2 on a card, and then go and spend them pretty much anywhere. There were also times where you could get debit cards with, the PIN, and then you could go, cash that out at an ATM. I mean, those were a lot more expensive and harder to get. So most of them, it was just, you're just, swiping it, wherever, grocery stores. Sometimes we would cash them out and buy gift cards and then take the gift cards and go, get those for cash. You get like 70 to 80% in cash for those. So we started doing that in about 2015. She ended up getting her house raided twice for drugs and fraud. And she ended up going to, I think she got 3.5 years in prison.
But you weren't living?
I wasn't. No, I was at the halfway house.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is her private residence.
Yeah, this is her house. So she ended up, getting arrested. I think she was in a stolen car. She had like $8,000 in cash, like an ounce of meth, something like that. Just
train wreck.
Just doomed.
Yeah,
doomed. So she ended up going to prison.
Did you wait for her? You put money on her books, come visit her?
I absolutely waited for her. No, definitely not. No, actually,
I'll be there for you.
I tried. You know what? She ended up having like 6 properties that were most of them were like halfway. Well, there was one halfway house, and the other properties were apartments that were usually rented to like some people in the sober community.
And she's managing all these? She didn't own them. She's managing them.
She technically owned them. I mean, they weren't paid off, but she actually owned these properties. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she owned these properties. She was a real estate, she got her real estate license, and I guess in 2008 the Vegas market crashed like crazy. So she was picking up all these, properties and whatnot.
Right.
Her house gets raided and she goes to jail. I had to put up, me and her another friend, Steve, put up 3 of those properties in 2 cars to get her bail.
Okay.
So she did get out for a little bit, and then she got, she ended up going back. There was a couple people she was running with that were like brutal. I mean, they were just, they were not good people.
All right.
They were dangerous people. She ended up getting caught with the stolen car and going back after, being out. So she got caught in another stolen car and ended up going back to jail. So it was kind of like, all right, there's nothing I can do here with that.
Right.
So I ended up flying back home to DC after this happened and, checking on my dad. I was staying with a good friend of mine. I was there for like 6 months and then flew back to Las Vegas and started living in her house, actually. So I was living in her house, and this is when I actually saw counterfeit bills for the first time. There was a guy who was associated with her who started making them, and the first time I ever saw a counterfeit bill, I was blown away. I mean, it had the security strip, it had the watermark, it was the right color, it was right texture, and so I was blown away by this.
So I don't understand, how does that happen? Like, I mean, you're saying that he was associated with her. Like, is this a friend of hers? One day he comes over, he says, "Hey, I got to show you something."
Yeah.
I mean,
so essentially, he came over. He was like, in the meth world.
Right.
So he came over to deliver a bag one day, and he had a whole stack of them. It was,
right.
I don't know, let's say like $5,000 or something like that. He had a whole stack of them. And so, he's showing us because he's, kind of showing them off. He's like, "Yo, check these out. This is this, this is this." So, you hold it up and you're looking at it and you're tilting it. And like, I mean, at the time I also didn't know anything about, bills.
Right.
Most people, they just, see a bill and they just assume, that it's legit.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is incredible. And so that really sparked my fascination with bills. So I get a printer. I learn about, cotton linen paper, the security threads, how money is actually made with offset, presses and tabular presses. And, so I actually start I get 20-pound cotton linen paper from Southworth Paper from, Staples, and just started printing the front and backs of bills just to see, the quality
right.
of the bill, see if you can actually get something that, at face value that would pass. It didn't work. It was they were terrible.
Right.
They were really bad. It was very difficult to get anything. Cotton linen paper is very porous. It's not like regular laserjet paper. So it was very difficult to get a very clear image on a regular, inkjet printer. So I was like, how am I going to figure out how to get paper that also feels like, money paper?
Right.
So, I started experimenting with all different, I tried newsprint, I tried wrapping paper, I tried, rice paper, I tried all these different papers, and nothing really worked. So I went online, I went online and just typed in, cotton linen newsprint. And this was when AliExpress sort of started, getting kind of big. And so instead of having minimum order quantities, you could order, like a ream, like 500 sheets of paper, instead of having to order, 20,000 from these massive companies. So I'm like, let's see how this is going to go. So I type in 36 or 40 GSM cotton linen paper, and a company came up in China, and there was like 500 sheets for, I think it was like $87 or something like that. So I ordered this paper and, get it in the mail. And I was like, okay, I think this is perfect, And so I start printing, and it starts getting stuck in the printer. It's like you're trying to run it through the printer, and it's not working. It's coming out blurry. So I messaged the company back and said, do you have anything that's a little bit thicker that would run through an inkjet printer? And so they're like, yeah, we have 45 GSM, cotton linen paper. And I was like, okay, this is great. So I ordered another ream of that. And instead of running the single sheets through, I was like, I'm going to, glue them together, let them dry out, and then run them through the printer front and back. And so that ended up working. And so I was like, all right, well,
is it still the same? Is it the same? It's not the same thickness as regular paper, though, is it?
No, it's very thin. It's
okay.
It's like newsprint.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about the same size as newsprint. So I was like, I'm gonna sandwich. There's two pieces sandwiched together.
Right.
So the back sheet is going to have the strip on one side, the watermark on another, and then I'm gonna glue those together to make one sheet of paper, and then run the back through.
Print the image,
and then run the front through, and then the serial numbers and the seal.
Right.
And then to get the strip to glow, the IR ink, I would use a UV pen.
Okay.
A UV pen, like a pink UV pen. I would get like a ruler and just run it down the whole sheet where the strip was. And so that way, if they checked,
it lights up. Yeah.
Yeah. So at first I didn't really know what to do about the 100 in the corner. So I was playing around with, there's OVI, so it's optically variable ink,
right,
in the right hand corner and these
like,
are the
it's like glitter. It looks like kind of like glittering.
Glitter,
right?
yeah. These are the old hundreds. These are not the new hundreds with the blue strip in them.
Right.
So yeah, it looks like glitter, and so I was like trying to use these like uniball pens, like you can get these clear sort of glitter pens.
Right.
And so I was using the clear glitter pens at first, and then I actually found an eyeshadow. I don't remember the brand, but there was an eyeshadow, and I would use a small Q-tip and dip it in the eyeshadow, and then trace, the 100. Right. The 100 also has it's raised a little bit. The most difficult thing to reproduce was to actually like get the 100 to be raised. So I would use a toothbrush and use Mod Podge and dip the toothbrush in the Mod Podge, and then sort of just get it on in the corner. So this took a really long time for me to figure out, because even with the paper, it wasn't really it wasn't working well enough to pass, because you also had you have the marker, it's a iodine pen, and it detects starch in the paper, and so it wasn't passing the paper test, or the pen test.
Right.
So I go back online, and I'm trying to figure out which company has security paper. And so I ended up finding a company that had they had check paper. They could make they could make watermarks. Like if you had a specific watermark for the paper, they could watermark the paper. It was starch free. It was UV dull, so it would pass the pen test. And then if you put it under a black light, it wouldn't glow white, because regular paper, when you put it under a black light, glows white. It's really bright. It's very noticeable that it's a counterfeit, a counterfeit bill. So you want something that's UV dull. And so I messaged them and said, hey guys, like, do you happen to have anything between 36, and 45 GSM?
They send you a message back saying, we're not going to help you make,
they said,
dollar bills.
Right. It was insane. They were like, yeah, we have that. We have that. And so, they don't think anything of it. I didn't even have to tell them a backstory. It wasn't even like, oh, I work for, some sort of creative, paper company. They literally just emailed them, and they, 4 days later, they're like, yeah, like what, how much do you want? Well, what's the smallest amount you can order? And it's usually a ream, which is, 500 sheets. So I'm like, this is awesome.
Where is that company at? Is that a US based company, or is this still from China?
No, it's still from China. They ended up opening up, this is years later. At the time, it was all from China. Like they did open up distribution companies in the US, but this was years later. So, you would have to order this, and then, it's usually I paid DHL. So, you're waiting, sometimes 7 to 21 days, for this order. But the smallest amount I could order was about 500 sheets.
Right.
So while I'm sort of researching and sort of perfecting these bills, I ended up moving to St. Augustine. So this, I was in Las Vegas, and so once she ended up going to prison, sort of shit hit the fan, just in the whole world that I was in, everyone was just either, getting arrested, or they were just out of control. Everything was just out of control. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try to get out of here. And so I ended up moving to North Florida.
Right.
And this is where I sort of learned to perfect the bills. So I'm living, I'm simple life. I'm just surfing, working, trying to, get off drugs. I was like, if I go somewhere new, I can get away from all this, bullshit. But I'm still trying to figure out how to make these bills. And so I ended up, ordering the correct paper. And this time, instead of using like basic inkjets, I got a couple LaserJet printers, and then some nicer, like a Canon 9500 Mark II. It's like a 10 inkjet pigment system. And then I started to learn about different kinds of ink dyes. Like there's pigment ink and dye ink. So dye ink saturates the paper a little bit more than pigment ink. Pigment ink sits on top of the paper. So because the sheets are so thin, a lot of times when you're printing on the front or back, it bleeds through.
Okay.
And so that was one of the biggest problems I was having was, getting the ink to settle properly on the paper, because the paper's so thin that certain printers would just bleed straight through, even if it was the correct width, it would just bleed straight through.
All right.
So I order this paper, get the paper, start printing, the inside sheet, which is the strip watermark. Started printing the front on the first piece of paper, and then the back on the sheet that has the watermark and strip. And then I would take a table, like a glass table, and then spray some sort of, it was just spray glue. Sometimes it was
like an adhesive. Yeah. Just
spray adhesive. Then I would line those up, and then take a credit card, and then get all the ink bubbles out to make it smooth.
All right.
And so I'm taking this and just going like this, to get everything smooth, and then letting it dry. And then I would get a roller trimmer and, line up the edges of the paper, and then use a roller trimmer and cut the cut the bills to size. I was usually printing 3 per page, 300s, per 2 sheets.
Right.
And so once I figured out how to make them properly, I was like, well, how am I going to use these? How am I going to actually make money off this? Alphabay was the most popular, was the biggest darknet site at the time.
Right.
From 2016 to, I think they got shut down. Well, they didn't start in 2016, but I found Alphabay in 2016. So I got on the darknet and sort of set up a profile, just a user profile. I wasn't a vendor yet, so I set up a user profile, and sort of learned about cryptocurrency, the vendor bonds, how you did encrypted chats to get people's order information or sender information. And so I was like, well, this is going to be the perfect opportunity to sell these online. There were 2 other darknet vendors who sold $100 bills. There was another guy who just sold 20s, but it was a pretty niche market.
Right.
It wasn't saturated like the drug market, and sort of the credit card fraud market was saturated with tons and tons and tons and tons of vendors. So it was pretty easy to distinguish yourself from the rest of
the 2 other guys.
Yeah. So I ended up doing a promotion. So I put on my profile that for the price of shipping, I would send out 2 free bills to whoever wanted to try them, as long as they left an honest review.
Right. Have you tried it yet? Have you actually gone out and tried to spend some
of
the money?
The first time I tried them, I went to a Dollar General and I used 4 of them. So I bought
$400 bills.
Yeah. So I got 2 prepaid Visa gift cards. So 200 on one, 200 on the other. So
and they passed.
Okay. They passed. No problem.
They hit them with the pen.
They didn't do the machine. That's the only thing that it can't pass, is if they put it into a bill validator.
Right.
But they marked the pen. She checked the light, and then she put it back in the drawer and was like, here you go. So I was like, all right, this is legit. The reason why I didn't really start using them full time myself is because I was living in a small town, and I also, from a couple friends who had tried to use them in the past, you usually get caught pretty quickly.
Okay.
Like
like
when
once
I was
it hits the bank, they figure it out, they trace it all the way back. Next thing you know, they're looking at cameras.
Right. Like when I was in Las Vegas, for instance, the guy that showed me the counterfeit bills for the first time, he started using them at all sorts of shops and buying little items like, packs of gum, a soda, and going into these, corner stores and getting change. And, after a couple weeks, they caught him. Yeah. They caught up to him pretty quickly.
I watched a video where they talking about the most successful counterfeiter in U.S. history was this guy who wife had no idea. Kids had no idea. He said he was a salesman. He had like a whole, like a bunch of luggage that he sold, like whatever it was he was selling, pots and pans, whatever, like had a whole thing that he kept in his car. His wife thought that's what he did. And he literally traveled all year round, and he had a circuit where he went from mall to mall to mall to mall.
Wow.
So he didn't re-hit that mall for another year.
Right. So he actually moved around
constantly, and that was and so the Secret Service was like, this guy has been doing, but they kept showing up at roughly the same time periods, the bills that he was moving.
Right.
And they weren't huge. They were like 50s. And this was back in like the early 80s. And they were like, but they keep showing up, and then eventually they came, and that they also knew they were the same bills. Put them in a file. They realize the same imperfections.
Exactly.
The same, right.
Exactly.
Same, because he's only using 5 or 10 different
serial numbers.
Yeah. So, what does it matter? Nobody's checking them, until it's too late.
Right.
So eventually they came in and they did a whole, what do you call it? A regional thing where they tracked the whole thing, and they could see, sometimes it varied slightly, but not much.
Right.
And so they went one time, and they would sit on that mall for 2 weeks with 15 guys, and they went around everybody in the mall and said, this is what we're looking for, this is what's happening, this is the guy should be here anytime.
Wow.
So they were there waiting for him
to make the rounds.
And eventually they caught him, Well, they tracked him. They found him. I think they pulled him over at like a gas station or something, or he was in his car or something. They watched him for a while.
Wow.
And they pulled up on him, and he had like a suitcase with like a couple $100,000 in bills. Counterfeit bills. And he'd been doing it for whatever, 10, 15 years. And they were talking about how, you know, he was the most successful, you know, not that he had moved that much money, but that he'd done it for so long.
Right.
You know,
right.
And the thing is, the bills weren't even the best bills. They're not even the best bills we've ever seen.
Right.
They were the fact that what bothered us is he's been doing it for over a decade, and we can't catch him. And they said we never would have caught him if he had varied.
If he'd actually switched his route up.
Right. They said if he had changed it every year or two. He said, but he didn't. He was so, you know, he had his little routine and the places he liked to stay, and this was his job. This was his life. And
right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because, you know, like North Korea, they have like super notes that are identical. You can't.
So I've always wanted to see one of those super notes.
Yeah.
I've read about them, but yeah, apparently I think they made like, well, supposedly like $250-350 million of the super notes or more, but apparently they're just absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
They're just absolutely perfect.
What is it?
So North Korea, you know, actually, I met a guy who's I'm going to interview, former CIA guy, but he's talking about like 80. I think he said like 80% of North Korea's their like GDP, right? Their budget is based on the North Koreans. They actually have teams of guys working in North Korea to do cryptocurrency scams, credit card scams. Like, that's just how they're making all their money. And they have super notes where they've actually got a little plant set up that makes like $50 and $100 US $100 bills. And they'll take them and they'll fly around Asia and they'll just spend them doing stuff like buying, you know, whatever. You're buying whatever so you can get $80 back, $70 back, $95 back. And then they're dumping them into bank accounts, and they're sending that money back to North Korea. So they're running scams using counterfeiting U.S. dollars and spending them. And sometimes they'll get them in the U.S. and they'll just spend them to get more money and bring it back into North Korea. So and the notes are indistinguishable.
They're absolutely perfect. Yeah, I can't remember what the flaw is. You have to see it. It's like with a microscope.
Yeah,
or not a microscope.
You're not going to catch it. The cashier's not catching it.
Right, no.
The banks aren't barely even catching it. Like, they don't even know how many they've caught. It's kind of like, what's his name? Jeff Turner came here. He's like, you know, based on the amount of money that he had circulated, he's like, and the amount of money that came back, he's like, I think a lot of the notes were never caught, you know, or caught years later after they've circulated through. He's like, because some of them I'm spending, and they never asked me about this town or this when I did this or when I did this. He says, so the notes must have gone through the system.
Right. Yeah. Once they hit the bank, I mean, you know, it's changed hands. It could have possibly changed hands.
How do you track them back?
20 times by the time it hits the bank.
Yeah, I was going to say, not that the Secret Service won't spend $100,000 to try and catch somebody who's moved $1,000 in fake notes, because they'll spend $100,000
absolutely
of the government's money to catch somebody who's past $1,000. Like, what did you just do?
They'll stop. They'll really stop at nothing if they get their sights on you. I mean, Art Williams, you know. So before, I should have started this again but so Art Williams was a super famous counterfeiter. He wrote a book. So I started reading about, you know, different counterfeiters.
The Art of Money?
The Art of Money, yeah. So I started reading about different counterfeiters to sort of see what worked and what didn't. And so it seemed like the easiest way to get rid of, you know, counterfeit money was to sell it in, you know, bulk for, 15 to 20% of the face value. So if you're selling, you know, if it's $1,000, you're making like
$800,
$250.
Oh, selling it for 20 or 30%. Okay, I thought you had a discount of. Okay.
Well, and yeah, if you're selling it in bulk, like, so if you're selling it, like, I sold a blocks in like 1,000 and 5,000, and so 1,000 was $250 US, you know, US dollars, or in, you know, this is the time when I was using Bitcoin on the dark net. But so I started reading about all these different counterfeiters to try to figure out what was going to work and what didn't. And so I was like, well, I don't really want to if I keep spending them myself, then it'll probably catch up to me pretty quickly.
Right.
And so
that's how you ended up on the dark web.
That's how I ended up on the dark web.
So what happened with the reviews?
So I think I did about 10 of them, 10 or 12 packs, and came back, and 80% of the reviews were positive. There was a couple people that didn't, they were like, oh, they didn't pass, but they look good, but they didn't pass for whatever reason. And so, I was okay with that. Right. I was like, this is fine. I mean, the two other guys on the darknet, I ended up actually ordering bills from them to compare.
You're right.
One guy they were really good. I don't really know what paper he was using, but it was very, very similar to newsprint size paper. That for me, that was the most difficult step, was finding the right paper and making them the right thickness.
Right.
Because printers, they can do a pretty good job of replicating the images. I also used Photoshop to clean up the images.
Right.
So I would import them into Photoshop, and then I also used something called a raster imaging processor printing program. So that allowed me to change certain dynamics that you wouldn't be able to change with, say, like a regular computer program.
Right.
I was able to change the size, the DPI. I could actually clean up, the images with, these, what essentially would be like an eraser or bold or contrast. And so I was able to make the image look a lot better than if I had just, say, photocopied it or just scanned it, in a scanner and then printed it through the printer itself. So it was, there was a lot of trial and error.
Did you think about trying to get an intaglio press?
I mean,
or are they just super expensive?
They're
right?
super expensive. There's one called an AB Dick 260, I think, that was pretty popular. I read about a story about a guy in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I don't remember his name, but they printed, I think, $100 million in counterfeit bills using an offset press.
There was a guy in Canada who had done it too.
Frank Baruso.
Yeah, insane. Like
Frank Baruso.
This is like these presses. One, they're huge. I don't know how big his was. I went to the Fine Arts College at USF.
Yeah.
And I mean, the printer is it's size of this table, and it's got it's got the rollers, it's got the whole thing, the machine that you got to crank the whole thing. I mean, it's outrageous, but it's a plate, and I mean, when it puts it on there, like, it's amazing, like the detail that you get, and of course it'll penetrate
they're absolutely, I mean, they're incredible.
But they're also like $100,000 for like because that's what I remember. That's the thing that the guy was telling. Like, listen to me. They were very the professors were very specific. They're like, listen, this is $100,000. Like don't get cute and think you're gonna run some piece of metal through it, or hey, I'm gonna try and see what it'll do if I put what was it like they had somebody one time put like a nail. Wonder what it would do if I put a nail through it. Well, it'll ruin it for one thing. You're gonna have to replace a pin that's gonna cost $20,000. Like he was like, do not. Like he's like, that's how expensive this thing is. Like you can hurt it.
Yeah, I mean, it was I mean, of course it's something I looked at, but there was no way. Yeah. I mean, and then you have to find a place to put it. I heard the ink is has a very strong odor.
Super stinks.
You're not really, if you're,
I mean, it's oil. It's like oil. It's
right.
But yeah, super potent oil.
Right.
Like
so if you're in a house somewhere or an apartment and you're that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So I ended up using 3 different printers and 2 laptops. So I was able to do like the watermark and strip on one printer, and then when those were finished, I was able to use the second printer to do like the front and the back.
Right.
So I was able to sort of speed the process up, because the most difficult part about printing bills is waiting for everything to dry, because if you run it through
too soon,
it'll bleed through, or at least with the paper that I was using. So you sort of have to print one, let it sit, and then print the others.
Right.
So I started using the darknet, Alphabay. That was very successful for me. They they place orders online using cryptocurrency. They send an encrypted message with your, whatever name and address they're using. You decode the message, you get whatever they're ordering, send the pack out, and then 2 to 4 days later,
the money's
package
released.
arrives.
Oh.
They have to go online and then release the funds. So I did that from 2016 to about it was July 5th of 2017. Alphabet got shut down by the secrets. There's a ton of every agency out there.
Those fuckers.
Every agency out there. Bitcoin was about 20. I think it was 2260 or something around that $2,260 at the time. I had about $44,000 in the account that they ended up confiscating $450 million in Bitcoin wallets.
Did you contact the Secret Service and explain that was your money?
I tried to, but they said they couldn't give it back to me.
You don't seem to understand. I have a drug problem.
I worked really hard for all this money.
So they're so unsympathetic.
Well, what the crazy thing is, all these darknet sites usually have there's different servers throughout different countries, and they have backup plans for this. So when you create these accounts, there's a 6-digit PIN. You have whatever your username and password. But generally, if something goes wrong, you have one shot to get the Bitcoin out of whatever their wallet is into another wallet. But with the Alphabet case, they actually ended up finding the server that had everyone's money in it.
Okay.
So, it was like,
you're just done.
There's nothing you can do. Like, if you get wind of this, there are other sites where it was like you would go to that site and it would say you have, let's say 12 hours to get all your funds out of the wallet, and you could at least have one shot at doing it. So that was, it sucked. It was awful. But this is what happened. So instead of doing any other cryptocurrency sites or darknet sites, I just decided to start selling them in bulk to, the friends, people I was getting drugs from. That was probably the most lucrative for me, was being able to trade drugs or, money for drugs.
Right.
I was living in really on the outskirts of a, pretty big city in North Florida. So it was pretty easy to, meet people, and give them, whatever, say a couple grams of heroin, I could give them, double or triple, in counterfeit bills, for the drugs. I had a couple hangups with that because people would spend them. There was one guy I gave $1,000 to, and he spent all of them in one night. And the next morning it ended up on the news. And I didn't really, I tried to stay away from, like, I wouldn't go in with these people to the stores.
Yeah.
But he knew who I was. He knew where I was printing these at the time. And so I was like, I started to panic. And also I was using a lot of drugs at this time too. So I sort of like, when you're using drugs, you start to get real paranoid.
Right.
And you think that everyone's after you.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to start to essentially go on the run. And so I started driving from North Florida to South Florida and spending bills in between. So I would drive through these little towns. I would stop at, Dollar General stores, buy gift cards, Visa gift cards, and, essentially go to another store and then cash out those gift cards.
So you started at this point, you're selling the notes. You're just giving it to, like, aren't you concerned you're selling it to people that they're going to get busted and that's going to catch up with you?
I mean, honestly, at this point, I didn't even care. I didn't even care. When you're using drugs, it's just like, again, I don't really care what happens as long as I can get the money first and deal with it later.
Right.
I wasn't living in this city. I was living like 45 minutes outside of this city. So, it was, it's a real small town.
Like this.
Like this.
Yeah.
Like this. Exactly.
I always tell people Tampa. Nobody knows where.
It's like this equivalent from here to Tampa kind of deal.
Right.
So I would drive into the city, every single day and sort of do these deals and then leave. So I sort of felt a little insulated. I mean, I was super reckless because, these people are also dealing drugs, you know, having tons and tons of people in and out of these houses, apartments, you know, wherever.
They're going to get arrested. If it's not for your shit, it's for something.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I was just super reckless about it. I mean, I didn't do that for very long. I probably did that for about a year before I ended up leaving Florida entirely. But
did anybody ever get busted and you were worried?
There were two guys ended up getting busted, but they didn't know my real name.
Okay.
They gave them the license plate number that I had, but the license plate number was out of state, and the registration was expired, so it didn't really go anywhere. But as far as I know, they didn't really. I mean, it's not like they ratted on me for anything. They got caught for, you know, discharging a firearm in public, you know, drug possession, just dumb shit, drug possession, and, you know, some other stuff. And they also, it wasn't like they had it's not like they had like 20,000. You know, it was a couple bills,
right?
You know, and, you know, counterfeit bills.
Yeah, but like I said, the Secret Service they'll spend $100,000 in man hours to try and get.
I mean,
get you for $200.
No, I mean they definitely, you know, they definitely will. I don't think that they thought that it was gonna go anywhere. You know, I mean, the one thing that I did do with counterfeiting is, you know, once I started to figure out how to make the bills properly, I started changing. You know, this not every single bill, but I would make batches of like 50 different serial numbers.
Right.
You know, and so then I would print a round of just that serial number and then switch to another one. And then when I would send these packages out, every person that was getting, you know, a package of the bills, there was a different serial number, but that serial number had been printed, you know, and going out to different people. So hopefully people weren't, you know, in the same state, you know, or same city or, you know, whatever. But honestly, I wasn't really concerned, you know, with that.
So you left Florida.
So I left Florida. I moved back to Washington, D.C. area. I started taking care of my dad. He was getting older, you know,
right.
And he was getting, you know, really sick. So this is right before COVID happened. I started to sort of print bills again at home. I sort of got situated with inkjet, laserjet, and magnetic ink, you know, printers. And the place I was living was perfect. I mean, I didn't really have to do a lot of work in terms of setup, because a lot of times when you're counterfeiting bills, you're moving around a lot, you know, or at least for me, you know, I was moving around to, you know, different places. Sometimes I was staying in hotel rooms. Sometimes I was staying in people's apartments, sometimes my own apartment, but you sort of have to move around so you don't have too much heat on you.
Yeah, I was gonna say it brings heat every time people, the local businesses or whatever, are catching this. The Secret Service will come in and just spend 6 months in the place, looking for you.
Right. The last place, you know, in Florida, there was multiple, you know, newspaper articles and stuff when things would get hit, because people would spend them at, you know, fast food restaurants, you know, racetrack gas stations. I think there was one guy who spent 4 of them in the same fast food restaurant in 1 week.
Right.
You know, so they're going, you know, and I used to check those kinds of things. I'd check the newspaper articles, you know, and so I was like, all right, I gotta reevaluate the situation here. So I started printing them again in DC and started using a darknet market called ASAP. Very similar. I mean, there's not millions, but there's tons and tons of darknet markets, you know, out now. It was very similar to Alphabet. It wasn't the biggest, so I didn't really think that there was going to be that much heat compared to some of the other sites. Like Alphabet 2.0 opened up, and this was after Dream and Hansa and a couple other darknet markets got shut down. So there was sort of an, you know, saturation of, you know, smaller markets, you know, coming up. So I started printing them again. This time I switched my method a little bit, because I started using a laserjet for just the black part of the bill on the front. So I would print the back of the bill in 2 passes, the strip and watermark in 1 pass, you know, on the back of that sheet. And then I would print the black, just the black front with the laserjet laserjet.
Right. And
then the seal and the serial green with the inkjet, and then spray it with a matte clear acrylic sealer. And so that was the biggest problem with laserjet printers, was the ink would smudge, or if it got, you know, any sort of, you know, rough handling at all, the laserjet would just wash right off. So I used this acrylic sealer to sort of seal that, and that also helped with the counterfeit pen. So I started printing those again. sending them out. It was very, very simple to, in DC area, there's tons and tons of USPS mailboxes, on the corner. So I would switch up the routes. I would drop them off, sometimes, 2 miles away. I would try to do 2 drops a week. So I would, let's say I got 12 or 15 orders. Instead of like printing and then sending them out the same day, I would sort of let, 6, I would do 6 drops at one time and then another 6.
Right.
So I would Tuesdays and Thursdays were the days that I usually dropped packages so I could get them out before the weekend. Generally you can get packages delivered within 5 days. So it was pretty. So
you're concerned they might, if you go to the same box, then they're watching the box. They'll just sit on the box for a week.
They'll sit on the box,
Even if they just photograph the tags of everybody that goes to that box, and then one day, that night, they find, hey, this is a box, this is Counterfeit. They've got 60 people they have to check out. They're going to find you.
Right, exactly. And I tried to switch up the box types. I usually use the flat rate. It's like, I think it was $8.50.
Yeah.
But I tried to switch to using the envelopes as well, so that way that, I don't know, just try to blend in.
Right.
Instead of going to a drop with 6 of the same or 10 of the same boxes in your car.
Right.
Try to switch it up in case I ever got pulled over or just whatever. So I started doing that right before COVID hit. My dad ended up passing away, I guess it was 4 months into COVID in April. And I started using drugs again. Typical, just all these bad things sort of, happened to me, and I decided to, go back out. And that's really when I started to ramp up. I tried to ramp up production instead of, I was working prior to that, at a restaurant, sort of just doing whatever. I stopped working at the restaurant and started just going, doing the darknet markets, full time.
Right.
Ordering drugs, getting, Bitcoin. A lot of times I would use Telegram, Wicker, and Proton Mail. So instead of going through the markets, because they take a percentage, and it also takes, these when you finalize something, it takes 3 to 5 days usually to get the money transferred to your account. I would meet people on these markets and then say, hey, hit up my Telegram, or hit up this email address if you want to do like direct deals.
Right.
And so that sort of was another like buffer to try to stay away from getting too much exposure on the darknet markets, because it started, they started to figure out how to trace Bitcoin. They started doing, dummy buys, and a lot of times when you're on these sites, especially when there's like, fentanyl and all these other drugs, there's a lot of, scrutiny. So I was trying to get away from, doing all that and just doing it, peer to peer.
So I want to mention something to Colby, that I have photos of like the sheets and everything, right? Like you sent me did you send me photos?
Oh, there's photos. Yeah.
I like have like photos of all the like sheets of his Counterfeit. What were you documenting it? When you said that, I thought, was this from the secrets when you got caught, or
no?
From...
So that's just from a dummy email address.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're actually, you can see they're actually.
Yeah, I have tons of them. I have hundreds of them.
So I'm saying when he talks about that, you could maybe even throw those up if you.
I mean, I have hundreds and hundreds of photos.
Yeah.
In a folder. I just didn't know if
Yeah. When you sent it to, no, I just remember thinking, oh, these would be great. Like as he's talking, I did this and this, and even if it doesn't even matter if the process is correct. He just shows the photos of the different types of things that you.
Yeah, I mean, I have, there's photos where it's like I have just the strip, like when there's no color or anything on it, just the strip, just the watermark. I mean, I started getting silly and printing, like, people don't realize that old money has, like, there's red seals, blue seals, orange seals. It's not just green.
Right.
So I started printing old bills and trying to sell them on eBay, because some of these bills are like in the thousands of dollars. And if you put them in a clear placard, and then put a
it's
piece,
even harder and harder for them to discern it, right?
Yeah, because you can't, I mean, obviously the feel is one of the biggest things about money that sets it apart from any other paper, and then if you put a PCGS, which is it's a company that rates currency they they do old coins.
Right.
If you put a PCGS placard on top of this, thing, people don't really question it unless they get it actually verified by another.
Did you ever see the movie Criminal?
No, I don't think so.
You got to look it up. It's the guy. It's a movie about a scam.
Okay.
But the main guy, the criminal, right? The main criminal, although they're all criminals pretty much in the movie. But the main guy he's kind of a super anti-hero. He ends up stumbling across a counterfeiter that he used to work with that had counterfeited. I think it was like there's like whatever, let's say 50 U.S. bonds that were issued back in the 90s or something, whatever, from the Federal Reserve, whatever. I don't even know exactly what it was.
Right.
But it's clearly like it's a note or it's a bond of some kind, right? I think it's a note. I think it was maybe a note. Anyway, there's only like 50, and there's like 3 of them that they have never been able to track.
Wow. And
so they're worth whatever, like $5 million, $6 million a piece, right? Just because it's a collector's item.
Right.
And he actually has a guy from England that they go to the guy and show him the note, but it's actually a counterfeit of the
whatever the original was.
There's 3 that are lost. Wow. This is one of the ones that's lost, supposedly. So he has the counterfeit note, and he goes to the guy, and he has a guy come in and verify it and everything, and he's going to buy it. And it's a whole thing about how the scam works, and
wow,
super interesting.
That's crazy. That's super cool.
And what's so funny is like, he actually at some point it gets like stolen, and so he goes back to the counterfeiter, and he's like, "Where's the other note?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, you lost the note? Oh, he's like, no.
He's like, "Where's the?"
You wouldn't have just made one. There's 3 out there.
Right.
He's like, "What was the scam?" He's like, "Well, I was hoping to sell that one, but I did make another one." He said, so that once that one was sold, I could then go, and if that works, I could present this one. We've got, so he said, because there's 3 that guy's not going to tell anybody about the note. He's a collector, whatever.
Right.
And even if he does, it doesn't matter. We can then later in 6 months or a year say, "Hey, guess what? From someone else, we just discovered this one." So he has it. So he then takes it and goes, provides that one. But they scam the guy out of a bunch of money. That he's like, "Okay, I'll do it."
Right.
But you have to put up $100,000 or whatever it came to, $200,000 for me to give you this note. You just lost the other one.
Right.
And we're 50% partners in this.
So now you have to give me.
But you have to put up the money because I don't trust you.
Right.
And so he ends up selling everything he's got to come up with this money and give the money over to the guy.
Wow.
Which it's really a scam to scam him.
That's so crazy. I'll have to check it out.
It's
that's super cool.
Great movie.
That's awesome.
It's one of those movies that I'll bet you they made it for under $10 million. It's got a bunch of secondary actors in it, but they're great actors. It's a phenomenal movie.
I haven't seen it, but I'll
you gotta watch it.
I used to watch.
You have to.
There was another guy. I think his name was Robert.
You have to figure it out. Find it.
Robert Talton, maybe, who was another U.S. counterfeiter story. Who I was like, trying to learn from. He was on American Greed too.
Was he? Did you ever see?
Yeah.
Did you ever see To Live and Die in L.A.?
Yes, but it's been years. I've been trying to find it. It's almost impossible. You cannot find it.
You can't find it. I know.
It's not on any streaming service. It's like, dude, what the fuck is going on?
Jeff Turner had never seen it.
Really?
And I told him about it, and I think he found it. Because he texted me one day and was like, "Bro, it was almost impossible to find, but I actually he found it somewhere." So if you remind me, I'll ask him.
I would love to know where, because I've been trying to find it
fucking
forever.
Amazing.
Forever. Was it William Dafoe?
Well, William Dafoe.
Yeah, William Dafoe.
He's great in it.
William Dafoe.
And it's one of those few movies where I didn't see the ending coming. Like when it happens, I'm like, whoa.
Right.
Wow. Like I never saw that happening.
There was another Vegas counterfeiter who, I don't remember the dollar amount, but it was in the millions of dollars. And he ended up getting caught because one of the checkout girls actually ripped it.
Whoa.
She ripped it. Was like he was doing 20s and she ripped it because, most of the time you're not going to bleach or you're not going to soak your bills in dye, like coloring dye,
right.
And so it was 2 sheets of paper and she ripped it open and it was white, and that was the only way they could tell that they were counterfeit.
Because it passed everything else?
Because it passed everything else. Yeah, it had everything else on it. So
those damn do-gooders.
I know. It's like Good Samaritan bullshit.
So what happened? Where are we now? So you're still you're selling the stuff. This was COVID. Your father passed away.
So yeah, dad passed away. So I was actually on a date. This is
you
good.
pull out the money on the date.
No, check this out. So I had just bought a new car. Well,
that's the problem. You were cheap. You went with I'm gonna slip this. I'm not.
I should have given him.
You should have given him real money. Instead, you thought, let me see if I can get away with this.
So I bought this car like right as COVID started, and the DMVs were super backed up. So I didn't register it, and so I had made these temporary tags are just bullshit pieces of paper. So I made a temp tag,
right,
and then I made a temporary license with my information on it, not fake,
right,
stuff, but my information. It's like weight, height, blah blah blah. Virginia seal in the background, temp tag. Well, I'm on a date, and
why didn't you get your own driver's license?
Because there was a 6-month wait for the DMV during COVID. In the DC Virginia area.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what?
I'm not doing that. I got my own shit. I got my own equipment.
I'm trying to drive my motherfucking car, dude.
Right.
I'm not trying to fucking wait around and do this shit. So we go and get ice cream, and we're going back to the hotel, and a cop pulls up behind me, and I just looked at her and I go, I'm fucked.
Does she have any idea?
No. She has no idea. I just go, I'm fucked. And I'm thinking, well, at the time I'm thinking that it's just going to be like some tickets for, false paperwork or something like that.
Right.
Whatever, whatever, fuck it. Well, I get out of the car and, things are taking forever. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, write me a ticket, let me go. And they're like, yeah, you have a warrant out for counterfeiting from 2018.
What?
And it's 2020. And I was like, shh. I was like, shit, dude. And so they're like, yeah, did you live at, X and X, residence, in 2018? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I did live there for a little bit, but, there was a bunch of other people living there at the time. So I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I'm sitting on the curb for like 3 hours, 4 hours? It was like 4 hours. I'm sitting there. And they like call.
Was this you?
Yeah, this is her. Yeah.
That's funny.
Sorry. Yeah. And so, I mean, the cops.
Did you tell them I'll just come down on Tuesday and take care of it?
The cops were, yeah. I was like, I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there next.
If only
next week.
That's how this works.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, I'll be there next week, and I'll be on the first flight out. I mean, the cops were super cool. I just was like, I didn't really know what it was from. Like, I knew that the address that they were talking about, but I had no idea how I got caught because I've never been physically caught with or printing any of these bills. But in 2018, I left a printer that had some notes in it, and then had one sheet of the strip and the watermark, like in the bottom, where you actually put the paper in. It was in the bottom of the printer. Why didn't you just
leave a video too?
I should have. I should have just written the whole. Yeah, my name is Christian Brown, and I like to butt fuck the banks.
Right.
And so they were like, yeah, you've been, did you live there? And I'm like, yeah, I did live there. And so they, takes forever. Got arrested. I had to transport me to.
Why do I feel like you're that's not me? What? That's crazy. I would never. And then they go, is this temp tag forgery? No, that's a perfectly good temp tag. Is this ID counterfeit? You know what? Let's just get in the back of the car. Let's.
Well, this is the funny part. This is the funny part. So, yeah, they look at all that stuff, but they don't really. They're like, why? Well, they're like, why do you have temp tags still? And I was like, because I have a DMV appointment, And so I showed them an email that was like, you have a DMV appointment, 3-4 months from now. And they're like, oh, okay. So they didn't really scrutinize it that much.
Right.
So I get transferred to Falls Church, and then back to Arlington. And because it was COVID, they let me out.
Nice. Yeah.
I didn't really have any priors, so it wasn't like, I was going to be locked in there for like months. So they let me out. It was like, I think 12 hours, 16 hours, from getting pulled over to me getting out, it was
like 5 in the morning.
Did you guys get ice cream?
Well, we had just got ice cream before I got pulled over.
That's something.
Yeah. It's like, all right, it's cool. But they ended up sending back in the mail that temp license. They sent it back to the address that I was living at.
So they ran it and checked out, and they were fine.
They ran it and checked.
Nice. That's a confirmation right there.
Yeah, well, you just
stuck with that.
You start to get super cocky. You're like, these fucking idiots. Like, they can't do shit. So, I realized that this was, probably going to end in a bad situation. So I was like, I'm going to hire, spend some money on a lawyer. It took like 2 years to resolve the whole case.
Right.
My lawyer was like, you could possibly go to trial and win, but I was like, listen, like I'm not even trying to take that risk.
Right.
So I was like, whatever they throw at me, I'll just take it. It was kind of crazy because they didn't really offer any pleas or anything up until the day that I went to court. There wasn't like we were going back and forth trying to figure out like what was going on.
Right.
It was like radio silence and I know the court systems were backed up, for COVID and whatnot, but it was just radio silence for like 2 years. So I'm thinking that I'm at least going to go, away from maybe, I don't know, a year, 6 months, a year, something like that.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, we went to court and they were like, can you take a suspended sentence? It was like a 6 month or 12-month suspended sentence.
Right.
And that was it. And so.
And this was federal?
Yeah. It was, I can't remember the name of do you remember the name of the Secret Service agent? I don't know.
What?
But
somebody
somebody had reported me. This house I was living at, I guess when I left, I had forgot this printer and this stuff. And so they went through it. They called the cops, and then the cops called,
Secret Service. They checked it out.
Secret Service. They checked it out. And so they weren't able to really link anything else, and because my fingerprints weren't in the system prior, I don't know if that's something, because that's another mistake a lot of counterfeiters make when they're printing is you're supposed to wear gloves so that when you're sending out all these packs, your fingerprints aren't a common denominator,
right?
On the paper. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, nothing. I was super lucky. I was super grateful to not.
There's about 1,000 explanations for why
right
that could have been found. It's like, it wasn't me.
Right.
I don't know. Could have been this. Yeah, my buddy was doing it. I don't know his name. Another guy in the house. Like, yeah, I did definitely touch the printer. Like it doesn't necessarily. So obviously, I'm sure they were like, you probably could have gone to trial. If you probably said, I will go to trial, there's probably a chance that they might have said, we'll just drop it. Because there's just not enough.
There wasn't enough, evidence, but there was a couple guys at the house that said that like I had bragged about doing it.
Yeah.
And then they also.
Well, you left that part out.
Yeah.
Now you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Now
I did leave that out, but they went to my dad's storage unit after my dad's storage unit, my mom's, and I think my sister's, to interview them to see if, and I mean, there wasn't anything there. I hadn't really been around them or living at home for a while. So, there wasn't really that big of a.
Well, then you definitely made the right decision.
Big of an issue,
They get 3 people on the stand and say you were, that's your computer, you were making money. Yeah, you're going to jail.
Right.
But they didn't find the dollar bills, but they could at least charge you once with manufacturing. That's probably 3 years, 3 years.
Well, if they had found the laptop that I was using at the time, I would have been fucked, which
Right.
was sitting in that hotel room. I had taken it out of the car when we went to get ice cream. I don't know why. It was like one of those like moments where it's just like that could have
Right.
made her, make or break,
Well, I've met real counterfeiters. I've met 2 or 3
right
while I was locked up in 13 years. Like, that's how rare it is. And I remember this one guy who'd been locked up. I'll bet you'd been locked up 3 different times for counterfeiting.
Really?
And he told me, this was at the Medium. He was the Medium. And he was only at the Medium because he had been locked up so many times for it.
Right.
And he said, like, when I asked him, I said, so what are you going to do when you get out? He said, well, I'm going to go back to counterfeiting.
Right.
And I went, well, why? And he said, listen, bro. He's like, you get no time for this shit. And he was doing like 6 or
there were bills or checks or
just... these were bills.
Right.
He said, listen, for the amount of money that I've made doing this and the amount of time, he said, there's just no reason for me to not go back to it.
Stop. Right.
Right. And this was like, I don't know what it was. 6, I want to say it was 5 or 6 years that he got. I was going to say 9, but I don't think this was the same guy. I think he got 5 or 6 years. And he said the only reason he had gotten like the 5 or 6 years this time is because it was like his 3rd time being arrested for the same fucking thing.
Right.
He said the first time he got like a year or 2. He said the next time he got something else, but it was always in combination with other things. Like he had a gun or he had drugs or he's like, if they just caught me for the counterfeiting, it would have been 3, 4, 5 years. He's like, what I need to do is not do all these other things involved with the counterfeiting and just stick with the counterfeiting.
Right.
So he was explaining it all to me. So I met him. I met another guy who had counterfeited. And I met another guy who had counterfeited, which was just stupidity. Like the reason he was
they
there.
They were just like bullshit.
I mean, we're talking about putting it on the computer,
right.
printing it, cutting them out. He was trying to make them, but he never could. He's like, I never could get even close. So my girlfriend and I, they literally had like they had made whatever, 30 or 40 of them. And it was like pictures of, I'd actually cut out like pictures of like Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or whoever it was. And this was, keep in mind, this was whatever, 20 years ago. I met him when I first got in, and he said we took them and we actually had a little plant right in the house with, it was like a little tree, right, a bush or whatever in his house. He said we had taped them to the limbs and we called it our money tree. It was a joke. He said, well, 3 of the bills were from the original patch. He said didn't look like Monopoly money. They looked
somewhat.
Right. They weren't really in color. They weren't this, they weren't that. They were a couple runs. He said, but so he actually went to trial because, first of all, his girlfriend's the one that told the cops.
Oh shit.
So they get into a fight, the cops show up and she says he's making money.
He's right over there.
They go in, they find it, they grab. And he wasn't there. They grabbed him later, counterfeiting. And he goes to trial. And he went to trial. I want to say we went to trial, or maybe it was just at sentencing that happened. I want to say it was trial. And the judge had said, look, it must have been trial because they charged him with like everything.
Oh, shit.
And so the judge said, I'm throwing out all of these charges because none of this money, nobody.
This isn't even close to being passable?
Correct. None of this is even close. And he obviously had it taped to a tree. He's like, but these 3 bills, clearly he was making an effort. He didn't pass them.
He was trying.
He said, but they look pretty good. He's like, would they pass? I don't know. But clearly this is what his intention was. You have 3 bills. And he ended up getting 3 years. I think it was because he went to trial. Otherwise, he may have gotten a year.
I mean, I had friends that got, locked up, not for counterfeiting, but, drugs, guns, and other shit. And I always heard that
if you go to trial, you're done.
You shouldn't even try to go to fucking trial because they will throw the book at you.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many guys were offered 2 years and they went to trial and got 20.
Right.
I know a guy that was offered 3 years. He went to trial. He got 17. I know a guy that, it's one after, all these 15 and 20-year sentences are for minor, petty crimes, petty federal crimes where they're offering you 3 years or 2 years or 5 years probation, and you fuck that, I'm going to trial, and you get 15 years, 20 years. So, that happens all the time. So, yeah, going to trial, that's a mistake.
Yeah, no, I also, throughout all of this, I had a really, really bad, IV drug habit.
Right.
And so it was kind of like, I almost wanted something bad to happen so that I could somehow break this cycle, because, on and off my entire life since 17, the one constant has always been, opiates. And so that was like, it was kind of like a moment where it's like, all right, I'm getting, older now, and like I had, OD'd a couple times.
You're almost trying to hit rock bottom.
Yeah. And so all this, other bad shit's happening. So I'm like, well, how can I, it's not like I consciously decided for that to happen, but I was just sort of like accepted any and all, whatever's going to happen is probably going to be, for the better. So I used throughout the whole, waiting to get up to this, not trial, but the court date, I, used throughout all this. It was just, an absolute wreck. And I didn't even stop counterfeiting, really. I sort of switched from counterfeiting bills to just going straight to cards and checks, which I don't, it was just like the most reckless shit ever.
You would definitely had problems. They grabbed you again for something else.
I would have been completely fucked. But the crazy thing is, like, I kept having these, encounters. Like, she had to pick me up 3 times in the same week in the same parking lot because I was found by cops, like, fucked up in the car, And for some reason, because it was like OD, they didn't search the car, really. It was more of like EMT rescue kind of shit.
Right.
And if they'd searched my car, they would have found everything in the trunk. So it was just, all these different things that happened. It was like, I really need to reevaluate my life and see what I can do to, stop all this shit,
Yeah.
And so
this isn't working.
Like, no, it's not working. It doesn't matter how much money, it's not like I ever, over the course of, you know, just my drug habit in 15 years is like was $1.3 million baseline. You know, that's like $200 a day. You know, which there's a lot of days I spent way more than that. And then you have gambling, you know, just all trips, all sorts of other shit. You know, and it was like, there's so much that I could have done to, you know, help myself and help other people during that time. And it's like I literally shot and blew away, you know, almost 20 years of my life. And so I was like, I'm going to try to stop all this, you know, and you know, I wanted to start helping people, you know, and so I had to go to rehab again and detox and, you know, all that shit. And so, yeah, I mean, I made it through the, you know, other side. So it was good.
Where's your mom now?
She's getting fucking old in Arlington.
Jesus. You don't have a good relationship?
Nah, I mean, we're cool.
Right.
No, we're cool.
Okay. So what are you doing now?
So I volunteer at a low barrier shelter, like 4 or 5 days a week. They do, you know, they do food, housing, addiction, mental health services. I got back into school to get my peer addiction health counselor certification. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now at the moment. Yeah, I mean, it's been really cool. You know, I go to a lot of meetings, run a lot of meetings, stuff like that.
For what?
like
AA
for AA, yeah. So, you know, I'm trying to kids that were in my situation, adults, whoever, trying to help them see that there is a way out and there's other side of things. You know, obviously the whole, you know, this whole fentanyl crisis, you know, like this is not new. Like fentanyl has been around for, you know, we were getting that shit 10 years ago. It's just now it's like everyone is switching from, you know,
they're now lacing all these drugs.
They're lacing all these drugs, but you can't get, you know, all the pain patients that were getting these pills legally can't get them anymore. And so now they're trying to find other avenues. There's just, you know, there's so many different ways that, you know, addiction happens. And so now it's just like, that's become the constant now is, you know, the whole, you know, fentanyl crisis and whatnot. So, yeah, I want to try to help people, you know, get through that, you know, as best they can.
So you're volunteering. I mean, are you hoping that turns into like a full-time job once you get your? So the
place that I'm volunteering at, if I finish this peer certification, I will be able to get a job there.
Okay.
You know, it's pretty. It's not that it's easy, but it's not it's not like 4 years or two.
Right.
It's not even 2 years. You know, depending on how long you can get. You know, how many hours you do a week, you can get through it pretty quickly.
What was the difference between the bills you made and like real bills? Was there any like things that were different?
I mean, the easiest way to distinguish those would probably be looking at the fine lines around the corner and then in the portrait, because inkjet, laserjet was clear, but they would rub off quicker. But the inkjet ink bleeds, so. I mean, naked eye, if you don't know what you're looking at, you're not going to know. But if you sometimes you'd run into people that were at, you know, older people that were at gas stations that, you know, have been handling money their whole life.
Yeah.
You know, and so they would look at it, they'd mark the pen, you know, then they'd check, but they would be like, this doesn't feel right. And so sometimes they'd put them in these, they, you know, have bill validators now. And so it would spit them out. And a couple of times people were like, they didn't understand why. They're like, we don't know what's wrong with it. They didn't think it was counterfeit because it looked
good enough.
It looked good.
It looks good.
You know,
but...
and the you know, the pen, it passed the pen test, but they didn't understand that, like, because it doesn't have magnetic ink on it. That's the easiest way for them to, you know, for bill validators to tell. But to the naked eye, to the untrained eye, not much. I'll send you all those. I have all these photos of them. So
when you said these guys were like North Korea was spinning these counterfeit bills in these other countries. These people who are buying on the dark web, like, is it easier to get counterfeit bills passed in other countries as opposed to the U.S.? Or, like, were these people in the dark web just using it domestically? Or was there
so all the people that I sent to was domestic. There were a couple people that I dealt with overseas for drugs, but it was a very, very long, difficult process. I also talked to a couple counterfeiters in France, and counterfeiting in Europe is huge, and like legit like counterfeit operations. Like they will have like all the offset presses. They do everything on an industrial scale. So it's like instead of printing, you know, I was printing blocks of whatever 10 $20,000, $30,000, they're printing, you know, $250,000, you know, $500,000, $1 million, you know, multiple millions of dollars. So I'm not really sure about the European counterfeit market. I do know that they're good though.
Yeah, plus most of these countries are you know, corrupt. So if you're in Romania, you know, or
Bless you.
if you're in Romania or you're in you know, Kazakhstan or you're in Chechnya or whatever, like the government themselves can go to banks and bring stacks of money in and just fucking run it through the system, and you know, it doesn't even get caught until maybe it works its way back into the United States. And you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many ways that because they're in bed with the government and the banking system over there, they don't mind ripping off the Americans, and ultimately they can help refunnel it back out into society. You know what I'm saying? If you go into the bank and you say, "Hey, I need $200 $200 in 20s for American," they're like, "Sure." They hand it to you. You go spin it out in the community. Whoever out in the community buys it or takes it, and then it gets turned back in the bank, and they say this is counterfeit. That person got hit for the money, not the bank.
Right, not the bank.
Right. So they you know, they work in conjunction with each other because there's practically, you know, the Romanian government is practically the mob. You know, it's so easy for them. So of course the government itself will invest, like the North Korean thing. They'll invest $1 million into all of the correct equipment. Why wouldn't they? We can make $1 billion. Yeah. And it'll never catch up with us. So, but you know, the average counterfeiter that's trying, not that you're average, but the average guy that's trying to do it himself, he can't buy an Intaglio printer for $100,000 to try and get that part of the process corrected. They have to work around it.
You know, the ink and paper. I mean, Frank Baruso, he was able to get, you know, pallets of sent from.
Oh, yeah, God, that's such a great article.
It was $250 million, but it was in US 20s. And people don't realize, like, currency, it weighs a shit ton.
Right.
You know, like, if you, $100,000, I think in hundreds is like 1 pounds. So $200 million fucking dollars in 20s it's a whole truckload.
That's a great article. You know, I actually have the article that was written in, I think it was GQ magazine.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I actually have I made a copy of it, and I have it upstairs in a box. Because when I was in prison, any really great articles that I read, true crime articles I read, I would make a copy of them and just keep them. I had a stack of great ones.
That's awesome.
And he was such a character.
He was absolute character.
He's like 5'5", chubby, you know, chunky, and a maniac. And, you know, just doing ridiculously crazy stuff.
He like fixed cars and, you know, was drug party world, just all this like dumb shit. And then he somehow was like, I'm going to crack the 20. And then he did it. And then he actually didn't end up going to prison because he had $200 million.
Oh, yeah.
Hidden away.
Did he have or did they never get the press?
Well,
2 presses, right?
So there was $50 million in one press,
right,
over here missing, and then there was $200 million in another press. That when he went to court, I think this is right. When he went to court, he mentioned to his lawyer, "I have $200 million out on the street," and they were like, "If you give it to us, you'll get." You know, I think he spent 6 weeks in prison.
No, he got sentenced, but it's Canada. He did get a sentence, but he got to do it in his living room. So he's got an ankle monitor on for a year and a half in his living room. You know, so you get to go home and just call in. But the other thing was they did what do they call it? They call it in a change of the flag or a false flag. I think they do. They call it a false it's like in the CIA, they call it a false flag, I think, and I'm sure somebody will correct me because I'm sure I'm wrong.
Right.
But so his whole thing was basically when they grabbed him in Canada, which they call it the Crown, right? The government is the Crown, right? The prosecution. He's like, the Crown was threatening him, but in his mind, I haven't done anything violent. I'm going to end up on probation of some kind, which is true. And he was not cooperating with them. It was a whole fuck you. You don't have any proof. You don't have this. So he's I'm going to trial. And then they brought in the Secret Service because he was counterfeiting U.S. money. So when they bring in the Secret Service and they sit down, they say, we're going to extradite you to the U.S.
To the U.S.
He immediately went, okay, listen, I'm ready to talk. Because he knew the U.S. will put me in prison. I'll go to prison.
He would have been fucked.
The amount of money was so over the top. He would have done 5 or 10 years at least. I don't know what they were threatening him with, but he was terrified because of the amount of money he had. So then he said, okay, I'll cooperate, but you have to agree not to fucking,
not to prosecute.
Right? You can't whatever, send me to the U.S. or extradite me to the U.S. and which I'm sure was probably all bullshit. Like the U.S. maybe they cared, maybe they didn't care, because I'm sure if the U.S. said no, we want him, they would have given him to him. But yeah, when he said he wasn't concerned at all until the U.S. Secret Service walked in and sat down. Then he just was like, oh my God, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Right. Oh, you're serious. But what's crazy is nowadays, all the paper, the OVI ink, UV pens, you can simple Google searches, you can find all of this stuff, on.
Yeah, back when he did it. Yeah, that was back in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, you have to, you had to contact, special paper companies, then somehow explain to them why he needs, USA 20 or Jackson or Watermark or whatever.
Well, the Alibaba thing, right? The wasn't it Alibaba?
Mm-hmm.
The one I was gonna say that had just come out when Bozak was doing. That's how he was able to buy the thermal printer. He's like, you couldn't find it anywhere else. He said, they didn't even care. And that when he did the credit cards, and they had the hologram for the Visa
or MasterCard, yeah.
He's like, every place he had called was like, absolutely not. And he literally took a credit card and cut one up and mailed it to China.
Yep.
For somebody he found on Alibaba. They came back, they were like, how many do you want?
Yeah, you can get, roll of 10,000 of them.
Where prior to that, you're just not getting it at all. It's never going to happen. But Alibaba opened it up because let's face it, the Chinese they don't give a shit about American law.
No, not at all. I had tried every paper possible, I would go to, art stores. I would go everywhere and I could find the right, thickness, but not in, UV dull, starch free. There's all these different variations, or sometimes it was, it was the right paper, but it was was too thick, to sandwich them together. And so, on Alibaba and AliExpress, you can get OVI water, and watermarking ink. You can get white, black. You can get, black to green, optically variable ink. You can get tons of other colors too. If you were doing 50s, you could do, gold to whatever, silver to gold or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's crazy nowadays how easy all of it really is.
Last question.
Yeah.
I think you might have already said you didn't have any, but did you have any close calls of you spinning the bills yourself?
So the closest call, I was at a Dollar General again. And so it passed I used to go to Dollar General because it was the easiest place for me to buy gift cards. And most people at Dollar General do not give a fuck.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's not because it's just in, Florida, they're everywhere. So I could hit, in a 60-mile radius, I could hit 10, 20 Dollar Generals, in maybe, a few hours.
Right.
2 or 3, 4 hours. And, each store you're hitting for, $500 to, let's say, $1,000, and so 2 or 3, 4 hours, you can make, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
Yeah.
It was an old woman. She did the pen test and she took it back and she was like, can you please hold on one second? So she went to the back to put it in a bill validator, and she was taking a long time. And I assumed that she was doing some sort of other verification, and she called the cops.
I was going to say, sometimes it's hard to get a detective on the phone.
Yeah. She called the cops. And the thing was, she had my ID.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, I don't know what to do. So I was like, do I run? Do I stay here and try to explain it away? So I ended up staying and talking to her, just I was just trying to be as cool as possible. I don't know, I just got paid, from this job. I was doing flooring at the time. So I was like, I just got paid.
Are you telling me that my boss gave me a counterfeit $100 bill? He looked me right in the face.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, are you serious? This is
I
unbelievable.
trusted that man.
Because another thing is, I also would usually
give me that $100. I'm going to go to the police right now. Right. This is outrageous.
I was like, let me go to the let me go to the ATM. If you give me my ID back, I will go to the ATM and get you these bills and trade them for you. You know,
nobody's more upset about this than me.
This is outrageous. You know, because now I'm out. Oh my gosh, I have more in the car. You know, but if you mix them in, you know, I would always mix them in with some real bills instead of just going, you know, flat out on counterfeit. You know, 1s, 5s, 10s, 20s. So I'm standing there and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to be like, can I have my fucking ID?
Is this when you punched her in the face and grabbed your stuff and ran?
Yeah, knocked her teeth out. Yeah. And I'm out. No, I was like, listen, I'm going to go to the ATM. I was like, if you give me 15 minutes, I was like, I'll go to the ATM down on, you know, whatever it was. And I was like, I'll be right back. And she's like, well, I don't know if I can do that until they get here. So we ended up waiting about an hour and 15 minutes. And after an hour and 15 minutes, she was like, you know, I'm sort of like every so often, I'm like, hey, can I just like go fix this real quick? And she's like, you know, all right, honey. And she gives me my ID back. And I just bounced in the car and dipped.
Fucking do-gooders.
Fucking good Samaritans, man.
Damn it, Granny.
It's like, God damn it. I mean, that was the closest call for using them. I mean, there was other close calls where I just would get pulled over, you know, for speeding, you know, I don't know, just other dumb shit. I ran a couple stop signs, you know, swerving because I was always driving fucked up on Xanax and shit.
Right.
You know. But it was always in the trunk. Everything was always in the trunk. If I was moving anything, it was always in the trunk. So it was kind of like...
They'll never look there.
They'll never look in the trunk. You know, and I'm white, too. So it's like, I don't have shit
there
to
you go.
Fucking anything to
you tell them, say, what are you pulling me over for? Haven't you heard of white privilege?
Yeah, duh. Come on.
Officer. And then kind of just accidentally drop one of them out the window and say, one of the hundreds and say, is that yours?
Like... Yeah. I mean, the sketchiest was actually in being in hotels and printing in hotels because these motherfucking room cleaners would come in without knocking and I would be mid-print and I would have 4 printers in the corner of the room. I'd have sheets on the bed, sheets, you know, on the floor, sheets on the counter.
I can see a clothesline with all the bills hung out. And they walk in, you're like, hello.
I have in the
nothing happening here.
I actually have pictures of a clothesline of bills that I'll send to you.
Okay, nice.
It was one of my first runs, and they were rough, but they still, you know, when you have sheets of money hanging up around the room, it's kind of funny.
Good times.
Yeah, man, it's insane. But I'm just super lucky that I was able to, you know, get through it all. It's like 11 ODs later, you know, out throughout my life. So
how much would you say you made over the years?
It would probably be in like the 1.5 to $2.5 million range. If they hadn't taken all the Bitcoin, you know, the Bitcoin would have been worth, or at least at today's rate, I think it was worth like 4.5, you know,
4.5 million.
Yeah. If they hadn't taken, if Alphabet hadn't gone, if I had transferred all that money out of Alphabet before it got taken down, it would have been about 4.5, you know, but honestly, I swear, like, if I had even had that kind of money, I don't even think I'd be standing here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably would have OD'd.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I would have been standing here. Or at least I would have gotten, you know, in a lot more trouble for, I mean, anything else.
Right.
I mean, I was just, you know, my whole life has just been a fucking mess of drugs and illegal activity.
Laugh, but he's laughing.
No, that's fine. No, it's ridiculous. I mean, this is a very abridged version.
Yeah.
This is like, you know, this doesn't include all the psych wards and getting stabbed and all this other shit, you know?
How did you get stabbed?
No, that was, I mean...
you didn't go to prison?
I didn't go to prison. No. I was running around like a fairy. No, man, I was living in this drug house and just, you know, I was printing checks and like... In the fraud world and drug world, like if you can offer something like that, then people are like, oh, yeah, come over here because it's like free. You know, I always have drugs, money, you know, food, whatever. So it's like a free deal. And so this girl that was friends with my ex-girlfriend who went to prison, she like had this super crush on me, and I wouldn't ever hang out with her. I didn't hook up with her. Like she was living with a bunch of her girlfriends, and she thought that I was trying to set her up because my girlfriend house had gotten raided. So she thought that I was trying to set her up.
Right.
Just like my, you know, ex, which I didn't set her up, but she, you know, she's all
they have to blame somebody.
Methed out, and they're like, oh, it must have been, you know, this motherfucker over here. And so she had four of her friends kick in the door of the drug house.
Guy friends.
Okay. Kick in the front door of the house. One of them came up behind me with like one of those big ass Rambo knives.
Right.
And then another one was like standing in front of me, and he's like, you know, like sort of hitting me in the face, and he just reaches around with a knife and just stabs me right here in the like kidney. And so my friend Jameson pulls out two, like I think it was a Beretta APX and like a 6-hour P226, which are handguns, and he's like standing in the middle of the room, and he's like pointing the gun at me and this dude with the knife behind my neck, and then he's pointing it with these other motherfuckers. He's like, you know, get the fuck out of here. And they're like, oh shit, he's got the strap. You know, and then the guy,
John Wick shit.
The guy, the guy with the knife behind me ended up tripping because there was this little step where we were standing. He ended up tripping, and I ended up falling on him. But he was like real scared because
I thought you were gonna say the K-bar. He
just
fell on the K-bar,
just went my neck.
Right through.
No,
right.
he was like shaking. He was like shaking like this, you know, and like as soon as he fell, he was like, oh my god, and he drops the knife and like runs out. But I couldn't walk for like 2 months. That was kind of fucked.
Why?
Well, because they got me right here, like right behind the kidney. It just.
Did you go to the doctor?
I did not. No. Fuck that, man.
Why?
I don't know. I honestly don't really go to doctors.
It's not a gunshot wound.
No, well, because I was always scared that they were gonna either hold me and I was gonna go through withdrawal.
Right.
Because the last, like I went to Value Hospital. I overdosed in the middle of Flamingo Avenue. Off-duty cop found me, and they sent me to a psych ward for 31 days. After that, like I was in the hospital for 5 days.
That's where you want to detox, psych ward.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's fucking awesome. They put you in a room by yourself, no food, no water. You're not allowed to do shit.
Do they give you the turtle suit?
They didn't give me the turtle suit. They took everything and just gave me an open-ended, just, you know, it was like a hospital gown, essentially.
It was like in prison, they give you like a turtle suit. It's like this thick material that has a couple straps on the side.
Really?
And it loops over you like it's a big vest with straps.
No. Yeah, no.
Horrible.
No, they this place was like, I mean, it was brutal. They ended up getting shut down in it must have been like 2016 for patient brokering and shit across state lines, but yeah, it was, I mean, it was character, man. It was fucking characters up in there. You know, I'm like, dude, I was like, dude, I'm a heroin addict. Like, I need to get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Like, so, but yeah. Anyways,
in Las Vegas, did you ever use the bills in Vegas, or you're still learning how to print in Vegas?
So I didn't really use the bills in Vegas because I didn't have the correct paper and the correct method to do everything yet. Vegas was pretty much check fraud and credit card fraud at that point. It wasn't really till I moved to Florida till I started to get pretty big into counterfeiting.
Would you ever consider paying somebody's bail with?
No. Actually, the girl who got arrested did that, and yeah, she ended up doing that. She got away with it though. But no, I wouldn't. Wow. No, I wouldn't do that. That's pretty ballsy.
Remember that guy did that?
That's pretty ballsy.
The guy who spent all the money at Six Flags?
Oh yeah. He there was a guy that came in. He did not a lot of counterfeiting, but he did do. It was really he was the guy who was out selling the bills. He didn't make the bills, right? No, but was it that he got
him and his buddies? This is two different stories, but his buddy got caught and he paid his bail money or whatever
with counterfeit bills.
I think that's kind of what set the alarms. And then they all went to Six Flags, like a whole family. And they're all spending like counterfeit, and they're on a roller coaster. And then when they got the roller coaster, their bars wouldn't show up. And when they back in the roller coaster, the cops were there. Oh my god, dude, that's insane. Yeah, no, that she paid with counterfeit bills and stolen checks, and it came, it eventually caught up to her.
Right.
I mean, but yeah, no fucking way, man.
Yeah, well, the moment you get caught and you continue to commit crime, that they really have no sympathy for you at all at that point. Like, you get caught for a crime and then you start committing additional crimes while you're out on bond or to try and cover something, then they're just like, this guy's, that's it. Right. If we were going to give him a chance at all, he just lost it.
Right. I mean, I also I would tell people sometimes in the beginning, like when you start buying drugs with it, you're like, oh, maybe I should tell them, maybe I shouldn't. But in the end, I just started telling them that they were fake just so that there was, they weren't ever going to come back and,
right.
Because
like the guy with Jeff Turner. The guy came back and was like, "Look, what's going on with this?" And he's like, "I'm not mad. I just want to know what's happening."
Right.
Jeff explained it, and then they worked out a deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like whatever, like 3 for, you know, you could give them 3 if you're buying a gram of dope or, you know, whatever, you can give them 3, you know, $300 bills for 100,
yeah,
you know, something like that. So, yeah.
Okay. What do you think?
Yeah. One more question.
Yeah.
Were you ever able to build up like a big stash, or like just because of your habit, like you just were?
The most that I ever had in real cash at one time was like 170,000 cash, and between various prepaid cards and whatnot, each prepaid card probably had like 6 to 10,000. So $250,000 probably. But I can shoot that away real quick.
Yeah.
Oh
my God.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. The night that I got night that I got arrested, she panicked and she went to that place I was staying at and carried a 110-pound safe out of the fucking apartment and puts it in the back of her car, and then is like waiting for me, you know, to call and be like, "Get me out." You know,
what were you gonna do? Walk in with the safe?
I bailed. No, she was scared that they were gonna go to the apartment that I was living at and, like, you know,
raid it and
check everything. You know,
what was in the safe?
It was $170,000 in cash.
Oh, okay.
Real cash, not fake cash.
Right.
You know, and prepaid cards and all this shit. And so I don't know how she got it. I don't even know. I could barely get it in the apartment. I don't even know how she got it out of the apartment into her fucking car. And then she picks me up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, and she's like, "Oh yeah," and she like had a blanket over it. She's like, "Oh yeah, here's your baby, here's your safe." It's like, fuck, thank God. My roommate was also he was a cop calling fuck, so
right.
Thank God. But no, they didn't go to the apartment at all. You know, just paranoia.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. But we went on a lot of trips with all that. Bought some cars, did some bullshit, whatever. I didn't get a smart, like, my first smartphone until I was 26.
I didn't get my first smartphone until I was 49, a couple months before my 50th birthday.
That's wild.
I know.
That must have been insane.
Well, I saw them on TV. Like, I would see the people doing I was like, wow, they're moving their fingers fast. They would see them doing this, and I thought, there's something there.
The swipe.
Every once in a while there'd be a commercial. Like, okay, that's a smartphone, right?
I mean, I couldn't believe the first time I ever got a phone that like could go on the internet and check everything. I was blown away because I always had the Nokia burner phones.
Right.
You know, you could send you could send 2-line text messages, no pictures. You know, but they were indestructible. You could fucking run those things over with a tank.
Text had just come out in that would have been 2005. 2005, because it was like a year or so before I got arrested. And I remember having my phone and text showed up on my phone. I was like, this says call me. Like, the fuck is that? Where did that come from? And I texted some guy. He was like, yeah, what's up? And he get with this phone number. I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, what is this? How did you do that? You put some stuff on my phone. You put a message on my. He goes, yeah, it's text. And he had to explain. He said, yeah, they do that now. It's a new thing. That I was like, oh, okay.
I mean, I remember the first time I used it for fraud, I was baffled, you know, that you could actually go online and check, and, you know, you could use cryptocurrencies, you could check messages from, you know, the dark net. I was like, this has got to be, this has to be illegal somehow. I couldn't believe that it was even possible.
Yeah, this can't be possible. Well, there's guys now that will sit in a Starbucks and do everything that I did, where I had to drive downtown, search public records, get them to print the documents off, get the documents, go back to my house, or go to a Kinko's, scan the documents, the document. Then I had to retype them. Then I had to do that. I had to print them back out. Then I had to do all these things that I had to do. Drive back. I had to file it. I had to do this. I did all these things that I was driving all around town. Now there's some guy sitting in Starbucks, just using their stuff to just do everything on that's
so crazy.
He doesn't go downtown. He just downloads it. He retypes it. He does this. He uploads it. He pays for it with a fucking card, a debit card that in somebody else's name. He does this. Right. Opens a bank account online. That, you know, everything's being done.
Everything's the analog way. Yeah,
and I'm where it's like, wow, like if I had this kind of technology, I would have been extremely dangerous.
Probably would have killed it.
I'd have never gotten out of prison. It would have been a lot more money, and I still would have got caught, and I still ended up in prison.
Do you think that scam's still pretty popular?
It's more popular than
now?
ever. Now it's more not just so popular. Listen, there's such a rash of them in Florida recently that Hillsborough County had a meeting of like 8 or 9 different counties throughout Florida where they sent 2 and 3 detectives. So I went and talked in front of 40 detectives to explain the process.
Wow.
Then they had me come back 2 weeks later, and I explained it to almost all of the heads of the public records offices throughout Florida. I had to go and explain the whole thing, and they were just like,
well, because, I mean, at face value, there isn't anything wrong. I mean, how?
No, and there's no way to stop it. Even if you thought, hey, this document, I feel like something's fraudulent with this document, they still, by law, have to record it. It's a public recording system. That's it. By law, you can't call anybody. You can't check it. You're not allowed to.
Right.
If somebody comes in and says, hey, you guys filed this deed incorrectly, or this deed, and it's a fake deed, and what do? They'll say, you probably should talk to a lawyer. Well, what lawyer? We can't recommend a lawyer. Should I call law enforcement? Probably. What law enforcement? Who should I go to? We can't tell you that. Like, they're not allowed to give advice. They're a recording system.
Right.
So it doesn't, if it's got a notary, everything's signed correctly, the document looks correct, we got to record it.
That's so
period.
Crazy.
And we can't help you, even if we think something's wrong. We can look at the system and tell there's an issue with all of these different this happened, that, whatever the case may be. There's satisfactions, there's transfers of the deed multiple times, there's this, all these things are fucked up on this title. So what are you going to do? What do you mean? We're going to record the deed.
Wow.
We can't do anything. We can't call anybody. We can't ask any questions. Nothing.
How did they end up catching on? Because the homeowners that you took,
at some point you drive by your house, or somebody shows up at your house with a U-Haul van, or you drive by your rental property, or suddenly you drive by your vacant piece of property and you notice that they're putting in a foundation. You're like, what's going on?
Right.
Oh, we're building our new house. Why, you bought this property 6 months ago? The fuck you did? That's my property.
That's so crazy.
So, or somebody borrows money on your house, and one day you check your mailbox, and guess what? There's a foreclosure notice.
Jeez.
And you're like, well, what's going on? And yes, listen, I've done it before. I borrowed 4 mortgages in a guy's name while he lived in that house. Hillsborough County came and grabbed him, brought him downtown, and questioned him for 4 hours.
Wow.
Saying, what the fuck did you do? You got 4 mortgages on your house. We know you're doing this. We know you're doing that.
He has no idea.
Like, bro, I worked out at the docks.
He has no idea.
Like, what are you talking about? This is my house. They're like, you got 4 mortgages.
Right.
You open up these bank accounts. We can see this. We can see that. He's like, what are you talking about?
Wow. That's amazing.
And he lived there. It's not like it was a rental property. He lived. I did it while he was in the house.
Wow.
What was really fucked up is, had I gone through the whole process, like I was gonna mail everything to him. So I was gonna drop the cell phones and everything off on his front door. Clearly, and this guy'd been in prison multiple times. Like, I didn't have any sympathy for him.
Right.
I was going to drop off the I was going to repackage the cell phones that I used, repackage them, wipe them down, clean them off, repackage them, drop the boxes off at his front door, and then I was going to take like the laptop, re-put everything back in the laptop, drop it off. Basically, like if you came outside and you saw a laptop sitting on your front doorstep, and you saw a phone.
Phones.
What are you going to do? Well, I'm not touching that. No, you're going to pick it up and be like, what the fuck's going on? You're going to bring it inside. You're going to sit it on the counter.
Right.
You're
going to figure out what's delivery, wrong delivery.
I'm going to deliver some of the stuff that I'm going to put, some of the paperwork I'm going to put in his mailbox. He's going to walk by one day. He's going to take it. And I had pagers and shit, right? I was just going to pick up the pagers and throw them in his backyard, So I figured either he'll find them and probably bring them, and like, what are these pagers doing in the backyard? And he's going to bring, and so
he's going to have all this. He's going to have
when it fall apart. And just beforehand, I was going to call him on his cell phone a few times. Just call up as a solicitor. Hey, by the way, such and such, we're giving away a free. First, I was going to try and tell him we're going to send you a free phone.
Right.
So, and that way he'd expect the box.
Right. So then he actually brings it inside. Instead
but
of
even if he
back
said
to
no,
USPS or whatever.
Even if he said, go fuck yourself, I don't want your free phone, I would have put it there anyway. He's still going to bring it inside. But if he had said yes, then I would have dropped it off and told him that it's a phone. I would have called him, hey, did you get the phone? Okay, great. By the way, it's already loaded. You can use it. And on that phone, I would have already called him from the phone.
From the phone. So it has a record of that number or,
So the cops are going to be like, you got 3 phone calls. Even you don't know who this is. You got 3 phone calls and you got the phone in your house.
Right. Right. So there's no way you can dispute.
He would have had a lot harder time during that 4 hours than he actually had.
I'm
If
sure
I had
that
gone through the whole thing, which I
right,
didn't.
there's no way that, I mean.
Well, I got caught mid-scam.
You got caught mid-scam?
Mid-scam. So but had I gone through the whole thing, all the bank accounts would have been opened in his name, everything. So he would have had 7 or 8 bank accounts opened in his name. He would have had $400,000 or $500,000 that would have been laundered through the bank accounts, money pulled out of the bank. He would have had all the devices that were used to create these things. The laptop would have had copies of the deeds that were typed out, the satisfactions. Every document that had been provided to anybody, W-2s, pay stubs, everything would have been on there.
Wow.
Now, I would have erased them, but they would still be on the hard drive. So it's like,
Right.
okay, I'm going to delete this. So he can't see it because he's not a computer expert. But when they
right.
grabbed the laptop and they ran a search, they go, oh, that's funny. You tried to delete it, but they was still
But
on the hard drive.
it's still there.
Yeah,
So how are you going to dispute any of that?
No, nothing.
It's
Listen,
like,
bro.
you're so fucked.
I know. I would have put money on his books. I would have,
Yeah. Of course.
He'd have done 5 or 6 years. He'd have been fine.
Yeah, he's all right. That's so crazy.
That's horrible, right?
I mean.
I feel bad.
Coming from another scamster.
He'll be all right.
It's
He's been in and out of jail several times. He was a
the,
douchebag.
It's just money from the bank.
Yeah.
Fuck it, dude.
Yeah. Oh, God, can you imagine getting out and having to pay back $500,000 of money after spending multiple years in prison? And now he's got to make restitution payments?
No.
They might have taken his house.
No thanks. Actually, I remember seeing the American Greed episode about you like 10 years ago.
Right.
And I was like, man, like that is a real scam.
Wait.
Like that. Like, what was it? 55 million? It was $55 million total. Like, dude, that's impressive. That's seriously fucking impressive. Like, that's badass.
We just did a review of my Dateline. Zach and I just watched the whole Dateline.
Really?
Yeah, and did a whole review. What's so funny is like some girl would show up on the Dateline and she'd start talking like, I trusted him, and and Zach would be like, oh, and I'd be like, don't do that. What are you doing? He'd go, she trusted you, you know.
Well, I remember they had one of the testimonials. This could be wrong, but you left some sort of artwork in their house, and they thought that you were doing that.
They thought I was mocking them.
Yes.
Yeah. It was a paper mache statue of a guy screaming. But the truth is, I didn't leave it. Like the guy said, I came home and their paperwork was strewn all over the house, and the house was trash. And in the middle of the living room was, with all of the documents spread around him, was the statue.
Right.
And that's not true at all. Like I had left the statue in the garage, and the paperwork we had in the files sitting on the counter, and the house wasn't trashed because I only had bedroom furniture in the house. I never furnished the house. I'm using it as a means to borrow the money. So it's like the house wasn't trashed. We never walked into the house. We never went into any of the other rooms. Like it's not like we're walking around. We had furniture. We trashed it. We went into the kitchen, the bathroom, and the bedroom. We spent about 3 months there to set up the scam and get out. Like whatever.
Yes, you were barely there.
Right. So how could it have been trashed? Like what was trashed?
I remember seeing that, and it was like, they tried to make it seem like he was like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
like the whole house was fucked, and then he left this mausoleum of
he mocked me,
mocking,
Yeah,
it's like true. Come on.
Yeah, I have better things.
That shit made me laugh. And then you were on the run with Rebecca Houck, right?
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
It was not fun. She was horrible. She was horrific.
Well, being on the run with people sucks. Oh my gosh, I can't. Yeah.
Well,
I like to travel solo because it's just like just so much extra drama.
Oh, and but we had plenty of money, but she had just mental problems. She was bipolar. She's up and down. She's smoking pot to kind of regulate herself.
Right.
I got her on medication. She wouldn't take the medication. She would take it for like 2 months. Well, not even that, maybe a month. And then she would get off it because she was like, I feel fine. Like, of course you feel fine because you're
taking the drugs,
right?
Or you're taking the medication.
And the real problem was she was like, I don't ever feel super happy like I used to.
Right.
You feel like a normal person.
Right.
And most people don't ever hit that manic phase where they suddenly think they're a movie star and they're amazing and they're wonderful, and that they don't ever get that euphoric feeling that people with bipolar do.
Right. The extreme highs and extreme lows.
But you're also she's also not at the bottom either.
Right.
Like you're also not suicidal and wanting to kill people. So that's where we want you, in the middle. And now she didn't want to do that.
Right. I sort of thought like that too. Like I was like, why are people depressed? Like if you just use drugs, then you won't be depressed. Like all these like traumatic, events that happen, I'm like, dude, just shoot dope, dude. You're good.
I was gonna say I had a buddy named Rudy who was also bipolar, and Rudy used to say, I'd be like, bro, why don't you just get on drugs? He goes, fuck that, I've tried that. I'm like, well, why? I said, why don't you just get medication? Not drugs, but medication.
Right.
And he was like, listen, he's like, because the highs are so good, he said, I accept the lows. He goes, I'll give you 2 lows for 1 high. That's how good the highs feel. And I was like, you're a basket case, bro. Like, that's insane. You're talking about wanting to kill yourself. Like, the only reason you haven't killed yourself is because who's going to take care of your dogs?
Wow.
And he's like, you're not going to take care of them. I'm like, I'm not.
You're like, no,
I'm not.
I'm not going to do that.
So I'm going to take him to the dog pound is what I'm going to do. And nobody's going to, they're 2 old dogs and nobody's going to pick them up. And in 3 months from now, they're going to euthanize them. So yeah, you're right. You need to take some drugs and keep yourself up. Or moderate, whatever.
I mean, it's different. No, it's super difficult to deal with people that it's like,
they're not rational.
No, they're not rational. It's just erratic behavior. It can cause so many other, issues.
Yeah, Becky would have burned. Becky's the kind of chick that will burn the whole house down around her.
Right.
Set the whole house on fire and stand in the middle of the living room just because she's angry and just.
Right, just because everything else is just, fucked.
You're gonna die. What are you doing? I don't care. I don't care. You're like, what's happening?
I mean, that's how my ex was in Vegas. I mean, she hit me in the head with a frying pan one day and split my head open. Another time she pulled a knife on me.
Yeah.
And she's just like, running around acting all crazy. And I'm just like, I'm not a very violent person. I'm just kind of like, I just got to get the fuck.
Right. Yeah, I got to get out of here.
I got to get out of here, dude. Like, I'm out, and I'm like driving around just like trying to get away from this crazy ass bitch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but are we ready? We need to go. We need to get back on topic.
Yeah.
Let's.
Those will all go
at the end.
back, yeah.
I was gonna say what's funny is the whole time when Becky would start getting crazy, all I could think of was I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. Like I'm ready, and then I take
you're
off,
ready. You're just I need to go.
And she'd be like, run away, just run. Of course I'm running away. Well, you're fucking psycho. The cops are on their way. Somebody's 2 in the morning and you're screaming at the top of your lungs. We're in a nice building. Somebody's called the cops. I promise you.
Right.
And we're on the run. We're both on the run. We're both wanted. I can't have the cops showing up here.
No. Definitely not. There was one time I was in I guess it was like Boynton area. I was seeing this girl. She lived down there. She had a storage unit. She, like one of these, U-Storage or whatever companies. Right. And, it was one of these trips where I was going down, spending bills, getting gift cards, whatever, and then just sort of chilling there. I used to surf a lot, so I'd be surfing, whatever. And we ended up staying too late. Like there was like a 9 p.m. cutoff for this storage unit. And so my car's parked outside. I have 2 printers, I don't know, like $4,000 or $5,000 in counterfeit bills in the trunk. And we're inside in her storage unit going through things, bringing out, putting stuff in the car.
Right.
So there's this faint alarm. It's like 9:30, p.m. and this faint alarm starts going off. It's like beep, 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 beep. And I'm wondering, like, is this for us? I'm wondering if, like, for some reason maybe we set something off. But we have keys to the storage unit. We're not doing anything wrong, but we're sitting there, and so I have a box, and I go through these 2 double doors to my car, and there's 5 armed cops standing there outside, and I almost just dropped the box and turned around and ran because I have drugs in the car,
right?
I have printers, counterfeit bills, gift cards, and I'm just thinking that, I don't really know what's happening. I'm just like, dude, I'm so fucked. So I'm standing there with this box, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, we're just, I'm here with my girlfriend. We're just, moving stuff out of the storage unit. So they go inside, they start interrogating us, and they ended up letting us go.
Right. Well, because obviously you're supposed to be there. You just made the mistake of staying too long.
Right. But it was just like one of those, instances where it was like, if I,
Yeah, you could have been caught.
I could have been, completely fucked over something so, trivial as just being in a storage unit,
cops are used to, that when they're kind of looking around, they're used to, they're looking for like a gun, they're looking for like a crack pipe, they're looking for like, if it's outside of that realm, then they don't even notice. I one time, so I had a buddy one time who was making, you should probably keep all this in. Oh, yeah. Not that part about the crazy, well, whatever. Anyway, I was gonna say I had a buddy one time who was making LSD.
Really?
Yeah, but St. Bart's. And now he actually had researched where the lightest sentences were.
For being caught for
making LSD. Oh, you can get like 30 years to life.
Yeah, I've always heard that it's a big deal.
Take
it as a big deal.
Went down there, set up a lab. He's making it. He would mail it or ship it in or even bring it in. And he would send it to these girls that would go around to Grateful Dead concerts and sell it for like $20 a hit, right?
Wow.
So he's down there and he comes through one time. He said, so you blot the paper, right? You have like a thing, you just put the blots on these little square papers. And so the paperwork has his I think had little onks on it.
Okay.
All the little square tabs, right?
Right.
And he's going through, so like I got a stack of them, right? Like he's like, I got like whatever, 1,000, 2,000 hits or something. He has a stack of these papers.
Wow.
And he said, I went right through customs. I got pulled over to be searched. The woman goes through my bag and pulled that out. And she said, she kind of goes, and she went, what's this? And he goes, I'm a graphic designer. And she goes, oh, okay. And just kept going. Yeah. Boom, goes, eventually puts everything out. Okay, fine. Boom. You can go. And let him go.
So crazy.
And she was holding what was probably, $50,000 or $100,000 worth of LSD.
Jesus. I wonder if half an hour later she started tripping.
I was going to say, what's funny? He's the same guy that one time he got pulled over. So the paperwork or he had put the LSD was in a shot glass.
Okay.
And he said, so we were dabbing, whatever they were doing with little
eyedropper or whatever,
doing all the paperwork the night before, right? He said, well, there was still a little bit in the shot glass. He said, well, I took the shot glass and put it in the console, right? So it's sitting there.
Right.
He said, well, it dried out. So there's like a residue at the bottom. He said, it almost looks like salt.
Okay.
Like a salt water that had dried out or something at the bottom. No big deal. He says, but look, you have to understand, if you were to rub that and put it in your mouth, he said that's like 200 hits right there.
Jesus.
He said,
so it's a shit ton of acid.
It's a ton. He's just a residue. And he said, so they were driving in a van. And you had to look at this guy. He looked like a hippie. I mean, straight, like long hair. He's super thin, long, straight hair.
Right.
Everything exactly what you think a hippie looks like. And he said he's driving with a couple of girls. Or I don't think he had a couple of girls. I think it was him and like a partner or something. But he said, we're driving to a Grateful Dead concert in a van. He was like, we look like we have drugs on us.
Right.
He said,
super suspect.
He said, but we don't. They didn't have anything. He said, other than that one little bottle. He said, the girls that sold the stuff for him had already come by and picked it up earlier at the hotel. He said, so we're headed to the concert. He said, we're driving the concert. We get pulled over. They want to search the car. He said, but luckily, like you open the back. He's like, well, we had nothing in it. Like it was like they were like, all right, there's like nothing here. But the cop looked.
There's not a bunch of shit that they're having to go through. And
correct.
Like, oh, what is this? What is that?
But they pulled them out and had them standing on the side of the road. He said, well, he said, while we're standing there, the cop goes, what's this?
Mm.
And he looked at it. He said, are you guys you've been drinking? He's like, no. He said, that's from last night. That was in the hotel room. He said it was just a glass. I just brought it in.
Right.
Didn't leave it in the hotel. And the cop put his finger in it and went. And he said, literally, when he went like that, he and his friend went, ooh. Like he's like, both of us were like,
oh shit.
Like the Homer Simpson. He said, like, we were like, oh my God. And so he went like that. And the guy goes, walked over and,
he was probably thinking it was cocaine or something.
He didn't know what, right. And he said, okay, you guys are good. He goes, so we get in the van, we drive. He's like, well, we're driving. And we'd already told them we're going to the Grateful Dead concert.
Right.
He's like, so they go immediately and they're running around the concert looking for the girls to say, we all have to get out of here.
Jesus.
This guy just got dosed himself with 200 fucking hits of acid. It's going to be a problem here any minute now. And he said, so while we're looking for them and we grab one of them and then we're looking for the other one and we're like, you have to get us in your car and take us because our van's over there. They're going to grab us the van.
Right.
They know the van. He said at some point while they're trying to get to their car through the crowd without seeing anybody, he said there's a couple of cops with the main cop walking around and they're holding him.
Shit.
He's looking like they're trying to get him to point out who they are. And he's all wobbly and shit. And he's like, I mean, I can only imagine when that shit hit. He was, because it takes a while for it to hit.
It does, yeah. It's like 30, 45 minutes.
So he said it was
sometimes an hour.
Hilarious. But he had
so much acid.
But once again, cop did, it's outside of their kind of their purview, right? Like he didn't quite know what he's looking at. So
right.
He didn't understand. And I was gonna say one time I got searched and I was somebody else. Like I'm traveling as like, I don't know, Michael Eckert or something.
Right.
And this woman I get pulled over and she searches my bags and everything. And I had an ID that I thought I had lost, but really I had put it in a CD that was in my bag.
Right.
The old CDs. Right?
Yeah, an old CD case.
She pulled it out.
Those are perfect hiding spots for that kind of stuff.
Opened it up and saw the ID. And I remember thinking, like, she's calling me like Mr. Eckert.
Right.
And the name is in the name, let's say, like Joseph Phillips.
Right.
Like John Phillips, let's say. And she goes, she said, Mr. Eckert? She goes, what's this doing? I mean, it literally says Phillips on it. She goes, Mr. Eckert? She goes, what's this doing, in here? And I went, oh man, I reach over and I snatch it. I don't, I go, oh wow.
Oh yeah.
I said, I've been looking for this forever. And she goes, oh, okay. She said, well, here. And I gave it back to her and she goes, it's in your case. She goes, it's in here. Just remember, puts it back. And I'm
so
like,
she didn't even look at the name before she just had your picture on it.
No.
And she's just like, you must have lost this ID.
Right. If she had even put, one and one together,
that's so
I'd have
crazy.
been grabbed right there in the airport. But, and this is the thing, when I say it was a fake ID, it wasn't even one of the IDs I had gone to the DMV and got. So
Right.
it's not even a real ID.
Right.
It's literally, if she would have been able to look at it and probably would have been able to say, hey, this is fucked up. Like,
This
wait a
isn't
second.
real, right.
She could have, you could have grabbed the corner and done a little clicked on it and probably peeled off the fucking
the laminate
right off it. You know what I'm saying? Like she just, what's okay, thank you.
That's so crazy. That's so lucky.
My heart, boom, 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 boom. But once again, they're looking for drugs.
Right. Yeah, unless you have something that's like, unless you're acting really sketchy or have something out.
Right.
I used to make IDs with Teslin paper. I mean, you can get it on Amazon, and they actually have it perforated already to an ID size with the rounded edges, so you don't even have to cut them out. They actually sell them in sheets. Like they'll have 8 or 10 ID,
right?
Perforated IDs already cut out. The difficult part about it is centering a printer, to print to that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to get it to the right size. So,
right.
But yeah, that's crazy though.
Yeah, it's always that was the nice thing about having, once I would print the information on the laminated paper, in reverse,
right?
So you can sandwich it between the card, and the transparency,
right?
So it has to be in reverse. It was taking the time to get it so that it was perfect, right where.
So it was actually around the the perfect corners,
right?
And
I would always leave. I'd always leave like something at the bottom and something at the top that you can match up, right? Like if it says, Florida ID or Florida driver's license, you want, okay, well, I know if I can get that perfect, and then this up here, whatever it said at the top, like if it was a 0, get the 0 and this to line up, then everything's where it's supposed to be.
Right.
But still, you get that, and it's funny when you were talking about the glue. I would literally take like a glue stick.
Yeah.
And glue, and then I'd put it in there, and then I would take a thing and I'd have to squeegee
it out
all the bubbles.
Yeah.
And then flip it over, and then I'd take an X-Acto knife and just cut around it over, a little bit.
Over and over.
Then when it's done, take 220 grit sandpaper, and you just buff it a little bit on the side so that it was perfectly, and then they looked amazing.
I mean, you can get some really good, I first started practicing with just regular photo paper just to see like the quality of things.
Right.
But you can get pretty good, looking IDs with, printers. It's
yeah.
The most difficult thing was getting holograms, something that looked like a hologram. But again, you can also order holograms, and it's not like a state hologram.
Right.
But some sort of hologram to overlay. So at least when they, when they're looking at it and they, the light hits it, it looks like it's,
right. Well, I was going to say
it's professional.
Back then with that ID.
Was it were they Florida IDs?
The Florida ID.
Florida IDs, yeah.
This is not the new Florida ID, but this was before they changed it. So back then it said, I think it said state of Florida at an angle, like a 90-degree angle, over and over and over again, maybe 4 times.
Right.
And when I would etch out all of the information, by take the sandpaper. Well, I'd actually etch it out with like an X-Acto knife.
Right.
And then I would buff it a little bit here and there. Well, when you put the new information on top of it, you can still see the Florida ID. Now, it's not going over the information, but it's so rubbed out in those spots, it really just looks like an ID that you had in your pocket.
Right, something that's been old, old and used.
2 years old, but you could still hold it up and you could see parts of Florida. So you'd see it over my face. You'd see it partially going through the information section. So people would go, they would look at it. Oh, okay, here.
Yeah, it just looks like it's worn. I mean, it was the same thing with I used Virginia, New Jersey, and Arizona licenses a lot.
Right.
Because there was, there wasn't any 3D window. There wasn't, any of these crazy raised,
Right.
Nowadays it's your signature's raised, maybe the state's raised. They have these 3D hologram windows, the UV lights. I mean, it's insane how difficult, how complex some of them have gotten.
I can't imagine trying to, like, you really have to go to one of these. You have to go to somebody who's got the equipment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, to do it now. Like I was on the verge. Like I was one ID away from being able to do that.
Right. Right.
And once they change it, like I look at the ones now, I'm like, there's no fucking way you can do. You have to go to somebody who has the equipment. There's just no way to do it yourself.
Absolutely. I just saw one of the new Virginia IDs, and and they just switched. I guess it was in 2015. They had came out with a new template.
Right.
And then now they have another new template, and it's just
That's why
it's almost impossible.
That's why I always say it just became easier to just go to the DMV.
Right.
It's easier to trick the DMV to give you one than it is to figure out how to do them yourself.
Right. I never did that with the DMV personally, but it was easy to make other birth certificates. It's easier to forge that kind of stuff and get.
Right. Exactly.
The same thing with like credit cards. Like I never got IDs doing that system, but it was easier for me to make. A birth certificate, a social, and sometimes I'd use passports instead of driver's licenses because most people they don't really know what passports look like because they're not looking at them all day.
Probably.
So you can change the numbers and information, and they just assume that it's real, especially when it's photocopied or if you take a photo and fax it or email it to somebody, they don't have any clue. So it was very easy to sort of change all that.
I was gonna say it's like less than 5% of people in the U.S. I think ever leave the U.S.
Right.
Right. And I was gonna say it's funny too because back then when I would go use a credit card, there was a chance, 20 or 30% chance they'd ask you for your ID.
Yes.
Do you have your ID?
Right.
Nobody asks you for your ID now.
No, not
Nobody.
now. Not now.
And nobody calls. Like nobody ever call. Like used to be, you'd swipe your card, and they might, if the credit card company might come back and tell them to call.
Yes.
Like American Express, you would call American Express, and they go, oh, sometimes they put you on the phone. Sometimes they just say, I need to see your ID or what's your last four of your social.
Right.
None of that happens. Now it's like, boom, give me my stuff.
Yeah, it's people, they get offended when they ask for that kind of stuff. I mean, there used to be, codes at cash registers. There was, I don't remember the system, but let's just say it's codes 1 through 10.
Right.
And so depending on what code came up for the card that you used, sometimes it would be like hold this card, call for verification. Sometimes it was just, denied or, Can
you imagine back in the 70s and 80s where they take your card? You would be at the register, and they would tell the person, take the credit card. And they'd say, I'm sorry, I have to hold the card. Because it used to say, I don't know if it still does, on the card, it would say that this is property of the card of the, of the issuer, right? Like this is property of the bank. So the cashier had the right to say, nope. The bank wants their card back.
Right.
You couldn't do anything. Now, of course, that's humiliating and embarrassing, so they wouldn't dare do that now. But back then, in the 70s and 80s, they would take your card.
That's so crazy.
Take that motherfucker's card. Could you imagine?
That'd be so embarrassing. That'd be the worst. I mean, now, I think the biggest problem I ran into is they would ask, they'd have to have a manager put in the last four of the card.
Right.
Which, that's super easy because you should have these cards embossed.
With the exact
number. Yeah. A lot of times, or at least in 2013, we would use, gift cards, $50 and $100 or, whatever, $500 Visa gift cards, and they weren't embossed, and so you would have to take off the numbers with, rubbing alcohol, and then, you want to emboss the proper number onto the card so you can avoid that. Yeah. But a lot of times, you get lazy and you wouldn't do that. And so then they, they're looking at a card that, has, 83, 21, and then the actual card that's running is 4437.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bozak
like,
talks about. Fuck. He talks about like they wouldn't even have. They changed like maybe the name, or they wouldn't change much of anything. He's like, it'd go through. It was fine. You knew it'd go through, or it'd be denied. You'd walk off. And he talked about one time he had printed a MasterCard's information on a Visa.
On a Visa. So yeah, Visa's 4, MasterCard's is starts with 5.
Right. And the chick swiped it. It went through, and she goes, huh. She was looking at. She goes, this says it's a Visa. And Bozak goes, yeah, it's a Visa MasterCard. That's how they're doing it now. And she goes, oh, okay. And just handed it to him. He said, gave me my $120 pair of t-shirt or tennis shoes, and I walked out. He said he was with his brother, and his brother goes, man, you're fucking slipping, dude. You're slipping.
I mean,
he was like, can't believe I did that.
I mean, that's a pretty slick recovery, though.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, because you're either gonna freeze up or you're just gonna be like, no. That's how it works. It's the new collaboration card.
It's so funny to hear him tell the story. They were at like a Target or something one time, and he said he went up to, he gave a credit card to this chick. They were buying something. They were buying a bunch of stuff for like Game Boy or something. Not Game Boys, but they were buying like, he said you buy like the accessories.
Okay.
And they would sell them. They put them on eBay. They had a whole little thing going where they're selling, they got 14 of these and 13 of these. They just keep putting them up.
Right.
And he said, so we're buying whatever the accessories are. He said, we're buying it. He said, as soon as the guy was like, looked at him and picked up the phone and said like, hey, code 4, register 12, code 4. So it said something like that. And so he looked over at his brother. He said, I immediately pick up my cell phone like I'm going to make a call. And I look at my brother and I go, like that, like, let's go.
Like, we have to go.
He said, but he goes, my brother's not paying attention. He's looking at other stuff at a thing, and he looks over and he goes, he said, he didn't realize I'm saying, hey. He goes, so I turn around immediately and start walking. He goes, my brother sees me go like this and thinks I'm making a call and just turns around and keeps looking, not realizing
we have to get the fuck out of here.
Right. He said, so I start walking. He goes, I'm walking, thinking he's right behind me. He goes, so I'm walking. He goes, and as I'm coming up on the door, he's like, I can hear someone running in flip-flops. He goes, he said, just as I kind of turn, his brother goes, run! And he bolts right through the door. Through the door opens, and he's right through the door. And he said, so I immediately run out the door and go left. He said, one guy goes after his brother. He said, the guy grabbed me, and I just twisted and kept running. Wow. And so he misses him. He goes, but my brother's flip-flop blew out. And he fell, and the guy jumped on him. And so he said, I ran. He jumped over a bunch of fences. He said, I jumped over a bunch of fences. He said, the guy, he was, I'm like, I didn't even look back. He said, I don't know if he even made it over the first fence. He said, but I got away.
Right.
Then I came back later and jumped in my car and left. And he said, it took all night. I kept checking to see what happened to his brother, Chris.
Right, because assuming they
arrested him for sure.
Yeah.
He was, so I'm checking. He said, it wasn't until like 1 o'clock in the morning when it showed up. He showed up on the system being arrested. He said, I go get him a bondsman. I bond him out. He's like, I'm there. He's like, I go. He gets in the car, slams the door, and turns to him. He's like, you fucking left me, motherfucker. He's like, I gave you the nod.
I was trying.
I gave you the nod.
Yeah, the nod shake, man. Let's go.
He's like, you turned around and just walked. He's like, I nodded.
Dude, that's crazy. There was a couple times where, you're at getting electronics, because that's the easiest thing to flip, like Apple products, laptops, and you're trying to buy too much stuff. Because, so let's say you have a $5,000 car.
You're trying to run it up as quick as possible.
You're trying to do it as quick as possible because a lot of times people will do these test runs, which is not the way. You don't want to, get a card and run it for, at the gas station for $40 and then go, get McDonald's. You just want to go big because those types of purchases can block the card.
Right.
But then you go into an electronics store and you're trying to buy, $1,800 worth of stuff and you're, looking all,
sketchy
and, drugged out. People they sort of catch on to that kind of stuff, But that's a funny story. It's a good story.
Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Please share the video to anybody that you think would enjoy it, and leave me a comment in the comment section. Thank you very much. Please consider joining my Patreon. See ya.